Hello there. Welcome to the exciting and wonderful world of podcasting. My name is Oak. People call me the podcast professor. Some people make podcasts as a hobby. Others use them for discourse. Myself, I study podcasting as a profession. It's very cool and normal. Anyway, this world is inhabited by creatures called Pokémon. They assist us in making podcasts possible. Today, you begin your journey, and the first step of that journey is picking out your very first Pokémon. Oh, I'm so stoked. What starter Pokémon do you have? I'm glad you asked. It's time to meet the creatures that will secure your future in podcasting. Come on out, Snowball.
Snowball!
Snowball's recording ability will ensure that your voice is heard.
Snowball!
Why does it sound like that? Well, it's a starter Pokémon. You're not going to have the highest quality right out of the gate. Yeah, but it sounds kind of rough. Look, son. Quality is something you have to work at. Whether that's audio quality or podcast quality. You're not going to be perfect right at the start. And this has to be something you really want to do. Start with the small risk before taking the big risk. Most podcasts don't even make it past the third episode. And besides, Snowball is a perfectly decent starter. He just needs a pop filter, and maybe some soundproofing, maybe lay down a few blankets, but look, we all have to start somewhere. Okay, well, what else do you have? Great question, with an exciting answer. Come on out, Patreon. $5! Did he say $5? Yep, Patreon here is a little hustler. He's just starting out, but if you invest in him, he can grow to reach his full potential. $5? What's wrong? Oh, nothing. It's just, you don't want to give him $5? I mean, I don't know, it's just, what is the... $5? He's really putting himself out there. $1? $1? Yeah, that's the thing. Patreon's weakness is that he has very little self-respect, and he constantly devalues himself. It's actually a very common weakness in the podcast world. It's ironic. He wants to be heard, but he despises putting himself out there. Aw, poor thing. $1? Oh, $1? Ooh, you're not even gonna give him $1? It's just, I don't know him that well, and look, there's a lot of steps I have to do. $1? I don't really have change on me right now. It's a whole thing. All right. Don't try to guilt trip him, Patreon. $1. Look, I'm sorry about that. He can lay it on a little thick sometimes. No, it's fine. I get it. What else do you have? What do you mean? That's it? No, come on, man. Rule of 3. Where's the other one? There is no other one. I can literally see the ball on the tray right there. Oh, don't worry about that. What? Don't worry about that. What do you mean? Listen, what's your name? Smegma. Listen, kid. If I show you what's in this thing, it'll give you second thoughts about podcasting. And I really need to make sure you set off on this journey. What do you mean? The Pokémon in this ball is so freakish and disgusting that it may put you off of podcasting forever. It must never be seen. No, why do you need me to go on this journey? Your mom's single, right? Yeah. And it's just you and her at home? Yeah. It's because I can see in your eyes that you have a natural gift for podcasting, and I know that being a Pokémon master is your destiny. Then show me the third one. No, fuck you. If you don't, I'm gonna call my mom, and she's gonna yell at you. That's what I'm hoping for. Whoa, Jesus. I'm not leaving here until you show me the third one. Where did you get a gun? Pal World. Oh yeah, I forgot about Pal World. Now you're going to show me that third Pokémon. If I'm going to be the very best, then I need to see the worst. Alright, fine. You may want to step back. Show yourself, editor. Jesus fucking Christ! I told you. What the hell is that? Suffering. It's horrifying. Yeah, well, you weren't supposed to see it. Editor is the ugly side of podcasting. He bears the burden of other people's joy. Their silly bits, their lengthy tangents, their rambling. The weight of it all has reduced him to a puddle. Hey, he just tried to reach for my gun. Oh, I wouldn't worry about that. He'd only use it on himself. Editor, don't be such a baby. It's hard to be a host too, you know. I think he stopped moving. Oh shit. I think he's dead, Professor. That would imply he was ever alive. Jesus. Yeah, I'm sorry you had to see that. So you're going to be taking Snowball or Patreon today? Oh yeah, I'll take Patreon, I guess. $5. Whoa. Let's not get ahead of ourselves there, buddy. $1. Oh fuck, he's got my gun. Hello, and welcome to Select and Start, the podcast about meaningful and memorable video games. I'm your host, Keifer, and every episode I bring on a guest who selects a game that made an impact on their life. Now, normally I bring on one guest, but today I have two incredible guests. They are the co-hosts of Flashback 64, the chronological Nintendo 64 podcast. It's Gooey and McKenna. How are y'all doing today?
Good. Thanks for having both of us on.
Yeah, no. Plenty of room here, and it's an episode where we're talking about two games, so I feel like two guests is the best fit for that.
Yeah, okay, I like that.
Yeah. Now, which one of you used the red and which one of you used the blue?
Well, I mean, I don't want to jump ahead, but I actually mainly played yellow when I was young.
Yeah, that yellow was my first game.
So, I don't know.
I guess Let's Go those don't really correspond to one. Actually, I don't know. Do they correspond to like the
It's insane because they're like an enhanced remake of Yellow specifically, but there's two versions of them. So it's like, let's throw Eevee in there, but it's Pokemon Yellow again because Jesse and James are in it and all that stuff. It's weird.
Yeah,
I feel like we both. I don't know. I would have picked blue.
I'll be red. I'll take red. Yeah. When I was little, I always wanted to be the red Power Ranger. You know, when we were playing Power Rangers,
I just always picked blue stuff.
Yeah,
usually
you're a blue for sure.
All right. So Gooey's red, McKenna's blue.
Yep.
And let's get to know you both. What do y'all do, and what do y'all like?
Well, together we have a Nintendo 64 podcast.
Yes.
Called Flashback 64. That's what we mainly do now.
Yeah. That's like our main thing, but we're also big Zelda fans.
Yeah, that's how we met is through Zelda. We both do some stuff for the Zelda fan site, zeldadungeon.net.
Oh, lovely.
If you go there looking for a guide, you might see our faces pop up in a pop-up video that just shows up on the site playing some of our YouTube content. So we do stuff over there too, where we just do like mailbags talking about the series in general. Right now we are doing like a fun pass the controller playthrough of Ocarina of Time with some of our other friends. So we do that and we talk about Nintendo 64.
Yeah.
Mainly. And then, well, you've got your own thing.
Well, yeah, we both have our own YouTube channel.
We do too much stuff.
I play a lot of indie games, especially like the cozy genre on my YouTube channel.
Some Pokemon too.
Yeah, I do a little Pokemon on there.
That's why when you asked us, like, game, we had to find kind of a middle ground because I see you've talked about Zelda a lot, which is our collective. Like, if you asked us about Zelda, we could talk about it for forever. So then
we'll have time for it.
One thing we discovered, because we've talked to a few people about coming on podcasts and stuff, is like we have like very like not niches because Zelda is such a big thing, but we have like a couple series or like kind of things we're into, and then we know like a little bit here and there about other games, but like we're the type where we've like we've played every Zelda game like way too many times, like more than anyone should probably. So it's been hard to not hard, but when people are like, what do you want to come on and talk about? It's like, well,
Yeah.
everyone wants to
Or-
talk about Zelda.
Yeah, Zelda comes up a lot. There's a lot of things that you're surprised that people want to talk about, and then always Zelda is one that comes up. But what's interesting is like as I've done this show, Pokemon has not come up too much, which kind of drives me a little insane. And not just because I'm wearing a Squirtle shirt right now, but also just because this is the most popular media franchise ever. And you'd assume by like law of large numbers or whatever that like this one would come up pretty often. But again, this is the second time I've even talked about Pokemon primarily as like the main event on the show. So it's just very interesting. It's just a very interesting thing. Maybe it just feels too obvious to people, but it surprises me.
Yeah, that is strange. I mean, you found McKenna with some of your stuff. Like that's like some of the most sought after content that you've done.
Yeah, I'll be like, all right, I'm just gonna do like a basic let's play, and I'll be like, oh, this is doing really well. Why is it doing really well?
You're like, I'm not even that into it.
I think I might have like I played the Pokemon Pink ROM hack, which is a ROM hack of Blue, and it's like the most popular video on my channel.
Mm-hmm.
If you searched Pokemon Pink on YouTube, it would probably be one of the first couple results.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. Like Pokemon is so popular and so universal that like any new iteration of Pokemon, no matter like what form that comes in, is just like instantly popular. I was part of a forum back in the day called Nintendo Land that did not have a ton of active users, but the person who hosted that website, this guy, he did a YouTube series where he and his friends just played a Vietnamese version of Pokemon Crystal that was very poorly translated into English. And that exploded in popularity. And that like brought people over to like the website. It just like also just made him like pretty popular on YouTube because people just like wanted to follow this series and see like what goofy translations would come out of this version of Crystal. So yeah, no, if you have anything with Pokemon that feels even like remotely new to people, people will flock to it like seagulls. It's nuts.
Yeah. It ended up being, it was like for what we were picking, it was kind of perfect because like Pokemon, I've played a handful of the games, but it was like just due to like my age and like the popularity at the time, I was like it hit me at such the right age that even though like I didn't really continue on with the series as strongly, it made such an impact to me at like 8 or 9 years old that I could I don't know, I just still have such a strong nostalgia for it, even though I don't consider myself like a Pokemon fan necessarily, but it was like the perfect to bridge the gap to find a good game that we both like collectively love. That's not Zelda.
No, I get that. But let's talk about video games broadly a little bit here. As we know, no community likes to gatekeep more than the gamers. So we're going to have to check both of your gaming credentials really quickly here. Talk about your respective gaming histories, who or what got you into it, your relationship with it throughout the years, and so on. What is y'all's portrait of a gamer like?
You should go first. I feel like I've kind of told this story a lot.
Whenever people ask about my first video games, I always say, my memory is a little fuzzy from the time, but it was either Pokemon Yellow or Mario Kart. I had my Game Boy Color, Nintendo 64, and I remember those being the earliest games I played. I think for a long time I was more of a handheld gamer. Well, my parents bought us like home consoles, but it wasn't really me seeking them out. I guess everyone in my family gamed a little bit, but I did much more than everyone else. So maybe like I didn't want to ask for a whole console for a birthday present or a Christmas gift, but I would get the handheld consoles so I could do my own gaming. And with that, that always came with Pokemon game, which is like one of the things that made us pick Pokemon Red and Blue, because that's kind of that's basically what got me into gaming and what kept me into gaming through my whole life. Every few years there's a new one.
Yeah, you were hooked.
I was hooked. And those weren't the only games I played. I'd get a handheld console and play whatever other games my parents bought me, which were usually the more popular games or maybe some of the licensed games. And then let's see. Yeah, we had as far as home consoles go, we had a Nintendo 64. I think I probably mostly played Mario Kart at the time because I was 5-6 years old.
That was already there, right? Because you have an older brother, so like
yeah. Well, I don't
like,
remember when we got it.
Because it came out the same year you were born.
The year after. I was like a year and a half old when the console came out. But one thing I remember is going over to a neighbor's house and watching them play Ocarina of Time. And I didn't end up playing that myself until I was like 14 and I had money that I could use to buy things, and we still had our Nintendo 64. So I finally got Ocarina of Time, played it, and then it was like Zelda was all I did for so long. I just kept getting like I played through all of the games because at that point there were tons of them already. I guess we only had 4 like mainline games released since I played that. So I had a lot of stuff to go through. At that point, I think it was a lot of Pokemon, Zelda. I had also played like the Jak and Daxter games when I was younger. Yeah, I played
PlayStation Zelda. Continue.
Played a ton of Jak and Daxter as a kid. So, once I'm like a later teen, early adult, I work, I have money, I can buy my own consoles, and I'm still very much a Nintendo focused person. So
yeah, we're Nintendo nerds for sure.
I think I got my Switch and my PS4 in the same year actually, and then ended up playing a lot of the Naughty Dog stuff because the PS4 was the first PlayStation console I had had since the PS2. And I was like, oh, okay, I know these developers from Jak and Daxter, so I went and played all the Uncharted games and The Last of Us. And then I guess once I got through those, I went back to the Switch and realized there was a huge indie game scene on there. Tons of stuff being released on the Switch. We were playing Night in the Woods and Celeste. And from there, it was just that became my big focus other than like Zelda, Pokemon. It's just like seeing what's up in the indie game scene.
Yeah.
So just like so much going on there.
You're always showing me something that I just there's so many surprises all the time. Yeah.
Now I'm just like so overwhelmed by the number of releases there are.
It's too many video games.
Oh my god, I want to play everything. Like they could just stop releasing new games and I would still never finish all the games I want to play.
Yeah, I kind of want maybe it would be good for the industry to stop for a couple years and like figure out what they're doing. Gooey, what about your history with video games? What do you like?
Definitely Zelda, for sure. So I started like as long as I can remember. I haven't figured out where this came from. I was asked that I said I would figure it out, but my grandpa was big into The Legend of Zelda, like basically since I was born. I was born in 90. So right after that, A Link to the Past came out, and just as long as I can remember, he was playing The Legend of Zelda, he was playing A Link to the Past, and I'd go over to his house, and he'd have both the NES and the SNES there, and I'd play them, and I was so young, and I would have no idea what to do, but that was fun. And then I eventually got an NES for myself. My aunt actually got one in a lot of games, because this was the early 90s, the SNES was already out. Actually, she got it, and I remember being like, I got a Super Nintendo, but I think it was just like that time that it's like kind of like how they call the GameCubes Xboxes, like, certain adults, like, I don't know if she knew or not, but I was like, what? I didn't know. I was a kid. So I just remember going to her house playing, Super Mario Brothers. So like random Fester's Quest. Like I had like McDonald's game, Beetlejuice game, Duck Hunt, just we had a huge lot of games. So there was actually, we had a decent amount of good games, but eventually I got to keep that. I think she was probably like, you like this and play this more than me. Gave it to me, and my grandpa ended up getting me Legend of Zelda, I recall. From there, I just had that for the longest time. I never had a Super Nintendo. Knew some kids who did, but was always kind of jealous. Genesis was like a myth to me. I think when I was a kid, I played like Shaq Fu one time, I was like, oh, this seems cool. But I just had that NES up until the Nintendo 64. That's why we kind of chose that to do the podcast on, and a couple other reasons. But we started the N64 podcast because it was kind of like a good starting point. We were kind of doing it to sort of do what we're doing now and kind of track our development through life along with the time period. And that was like a good like starting point for me, because that was like the first console I really got. I was still pretty young, but I didn't purchase it. But one of the first ones that I kind of like grew up in more real time. The NES was kind of old by the time I had it. So that was a big one for me, playing the big tentpole games, Zelda, Mario, stuff like that. That was the same time period of playing Pokemon on the Game Boy. I had a Game Boy and then a Game Boy Color. But then after that, that's where I feel like we diverge a little bit, because I sort of stopped playing handheld games as much. I don't know what it was. Like, I would occasionally borrow them from my younger brother. I feel like he more occupied that lane, but I would often play stuff late in terms of that. So, but from there, I pretty much stayed consistent with Nintendo. I did get a PS2 for a while after playing Vice City at a friend's house when I was young, because it just blew my mind, But that's really just like a blip. I mean, I picked up, I had a 360, did a little bit there, PS4, but I mainly consistently stuck with Nintendo because like they had me with Zelda. That's a priority over anything. Like, there's so many games, stuff's so expensive, and it's like, I don't often want to get a console unless I know for sure I'm like gonna be playing a game imminently on it. Yeah. And so Nintendo is always, they kind of just got me because I always want to play The Legend of Zelda.
You didn't stand a chance. I mean, my grandfather was a Zelda guy, and god damn it, I'm gonna die a Zelda guy. It's generational.
No choice. Yeah, it's a weird thing, because when I was really young, I did a lot of gaming on our home PC, like SimCity 2000, Age of Empires 2, Civilization are all big games for me. But I can, like, it's another thing where it's like only blips outside of the Nintendo thing, where like I wouldn't feel comfortable like trying to say I'm like a huge fan of like, I can't talk about like the nuts and bolts of those games. They were always just like cool. Like, I don't really understand how any of those games really work. I just loved playing them, and I don't know if I was any good, but I don't know. There's something about that sort of management sim type of game that really captured my imagination. But I don't like to do a lot of sitting at the computer gaming. I'm always about sitting on the couch with the controller especially now.
Oh yeah, we have the same brainworms. Yeah.
It's like, I want to play them so bad, but I'm always like, when I'm at my computer, I always feel like I'm doing work. I don't know what it is,
Yeah, no, I mean, like, it's the psychological association. I don't like that my computer's so close to my bed, even just because it's so close to where I do work. So like, I try not to game too much on the computer for the same reason. It's like, this is the workstation. This is where I toil away in the minds of Adobe Audition.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I want to get away from this as soon as I can.
Yeah. Sometimes watching a YouTube video just feels like work when I'm on the computer. I can't describe it.
No, I get you.
I could watch a YouTube video on the couch. You kidding me? I'm couch pilled. I'm couch maxing. I don't know what.
Yeah, that's real. That's real.
Give me a computer for the couch, a laptop, one could say.
Like that.
Yeah, some deck where I could play Steam. Even
I do like going on your laptop.
Yeah,
that's like one of my favorite parts of the month is when we finished recording an episode. We do our Flashback 64 podcast, and I look up all the things of what were going on at the time, and I type them up in our little Google Doc while watching TV or whatever. And one of my favorite parts of the month is we record our episode, and I'm like, all right, time to start firing up the next episode. McKenna, can I borrow your laptop? And I just go to town on your laptop watching TV. Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
Nice. No, yeah, y'all gave each other a look when I said the laptop thing. It's like, oh, I hit lore here. Great. Let's talk about your podcast now, Flashback 64. Yeah. I think it's a brilliant idea doing a chronological podcast about the Nintendo 64. It's a fascinating system from a transitional era in the video game industry. You talked about it through like the lens of like your personal history with the console and how it was like present as like the primary console of your childhood. What else inspired you to do a Nintendo 64 specific podcast?
Well, I'll tell the more sad story first, and then we'll move on from there. But a big part of my gaming history is when I first moved out on my own. I moved from a really small town to living in Chicago, and it was quite that was quite a shock. But one thing that really helped me at the time was meeting a lot of new people who helped me feel welcome and good. So like I made a lot of good friends when I first moved, and a couple different places I lived. One thing we bonded over was games. So the first place I remember living, like we had a projector, and we would often project games and play in multiplayer. We would just put in games with sound tests like Wave Race 64, and we would just listen to the music, just go through the sound tests and jam out. Eventually I lived with some other people, and one of them, well, a lot of them were some of my best friends, but one of them, my friend Kelsey, she had all this, she collected a bunch of games and stuff, but she didn't play as much, and so she would often be like, hey, you want to come over and play some games, and I don't know, I'll bake some stuff or whatever, and we'll have some drinks, and we'll chill, just come watch Goo play games, I guess. So I would often do that, and it was, that was like, I guess I was an adult at that point, but it was like, that's what I think of like my early adulthood, was hanging out with these other nerds, drinking, playing random games. But it's like 4 years ago now. She passed away, and it was obviously, it was horrible, but me and one of it was her partner at the time. We lived together, but not at that point. But one of my other old roommates, me and her, were talking to her sister, and she was kind of a hoarder, actually. Kelsey was, and she was like, if you want to go through her apartment and see if there's anything that has sentimental value to you, she would probably want you to have it. As sad as it was kind of a fun experience in a weird way, just because we got to kind of go and look over all her, like, some of the stuff she collected, and like just imagine her, like, why she bought this, because it was like she had like the Akira jacket is always something I think of, just like insane collectibles. But it was kind of, I don't know, we were kind of reminiscing because we hadn't lived together at that point in like, I don't know, almost 10 years. Maybe not that long, but it was quite a while. It was, I don't know, it was a good way. Like we kind of bonded a little bit because we hadn't hung out or talked in a while. Not for any reason. We just kind of moved different places,
Mm-hmm.
There was a bunch of stuff where she was like, oh, she probably bought this for you, because it would be a bunch of random stuff that why would she ever want this? But some of that was like a decent collection of games, N64 games. So I've never been a big collector, but I got these games and I was like, okay, maybe maybe I could collect some more N64 games. I remember the first thing I checked, I tell this story a lot, so I'm sorry, but the first thing I checked was she had an Ocarina of Time cartridge, and I put it in, and there was a Goo save file that was completed. It was just, I don't know, it was cool. It was like unearthing parts of our history together. And so, I don't know, that was just kind of what got me going, because not only it makes me think of my childhood, but it also makes me think of like a decade later when I was in my 20s. I don't know. That was one of, it wasn't like it wasn't until like 3 years later we started the podcast. It wasn't like, oh, I got all this stuff, let's start a podcast. But like, it's really we have a couple old retro consoles and things like that, but that's kind of like the main thing that I have. And actually now we have to check them, but a year and a half ago, my grandpa, who I mentioned, also passed away, and my dad fought with my uncles to get a bunch of retro console stuff he had. But for some reason, I have it up above me. That's why I'm looking up. For some reason, he had like 3 Nintendo 64s.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if they work. I still have to figure that out. But these are artifacts of like people from my life and stuff like that. So I don't know.
He wanted a Nintendo 192. You don't know what his reasons were.
yeah, he's crunching the numbers.
Yeah.
Triples makes it safe. Now, triples is best. Yeah.
You look up like what was like the hardware like change from this generation to this generation. It's just like, we just sort of take two GameCubes together and call it three.
Yeah,
That's what he was trying to do.
He's gonna get at the soldering equipment and stuff. But what I mean, that's not really what started the podcast, but that was like kind of where I was like, oh, when I eventually have space, which is where we live now, I was like, oh, I kind of want to have a setup like a retro gaming or N64 setup, so we could kind of jump into it. But I don't know, is there a reason we started the podcast specifically?
I think we wanted some kind of project to do together.
Yeah.
I think that maybe this was an idea you had kind of floating around in your head, but we were, long distance for a couple years. So I guess this started, we were less than a year. Yeah, it was less than a year after I moved out here.
We started living together, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember what exactly.
I think it just seemed like you talked about, or we were sort of talking about, it just made sense for both of us, like what was kind of like a good origin point for the both of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like it's a very intimate history, not only like with one another, but also like this recurring presence, this like nurturing presence that's always appeared through life, not just through one another, but also through like people who you consider to be your loved ones. So I do think that that's a very touching point from which you can sort of talk about the history of something and try to understand this item, this thing that meant so much to the people in your lives. It feels like you're connecting to something and it's connecting with you in reciprocation.
That's like sort of because we hit upon different things in the show. We try to do a little bit of talking about history, but it's not like really like a history show. It's not really a review either. We're sort of reviewing the games, but we want to have elements of that. But I think the main thing is trying to get people's personal history with the games, or at least in some cases we're playing them for the first time. But we're overall trying to connect. We bring a lot of guests on and stuff too who have more of a history. So I feel like that's the main thing we're trying to hit upon, is the personal history of not just the games, but also that's why I try to tell, like, just have some little bits of like what was happening at that time period, just because I don't know, for us it's interesting because it's like it's some of my earliest memories, and then for you, like, it's like right around when you were born, so it's stuff that like we're gonna be kind of like thinking about, I guess, that period of our lives where we were like literally growing up.
Yeah, at some point I will start having memories about the things or the historical things we talk about.
Yeah, mine at the current, I was still pretty young. I don't know, but most of mine are like remembering the vague thing happening, but not really like having emotional reaction to it. Just being like, I don't understand what the grown-ups are talking about. Who's O.J. Simpson?
Yeah, it's like one of those things. Like you knew of Michael Jordan at the time, but like now removed from it almost 30 years ago, it's like, oh, Michael Jordan, 97 Bulls, Alanis Morissette, that kind of stuff. As someone who's listened to your show, like, I the recurring figures that keep coming up when you're talking about like, oh, this is still on the top of the charts. This is still there, still hanging out.
I'll never forget the Macarena. That's for sure.
You forgot it and it came back. But yeah, no, like even beyond like the personal connection and the historical value of it, I just think that the Nintendo 64 is this fascinating console to me. It's a console with just like 388 games published for it. Even the Sega Saturn, a console we consider a failure, especially here in the West, had like over 1,000 games published for it. There were thousands of games published for the PlayStation, which had outsold the Nintendo 64 at a rate of like 3-1. So it's like this interesting point where not only is Nintendo kind of not in the victorious position, but they are having this sort of stubborn battle where they're like actually not the winners. And it's a lot of like their own stubbornness that kind of undoes themselves, but also lends like credence to like this weird historical artifact of what the Nintendo 64 is. This using a losing hardware format, using a controller not meant for human hands. And yet we love this thing. We love it, don't we, folks?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, one thing we try to do, we're Nintendo fans, right? But I think we're trying to be realistic about it, right? Like, we realize that it wasn't the winner of that time period. we've said the console wars are back on our show, but we respect the PlayStation. I don't know. What do you make of the quirks of the N64?
I mean, some games do not, control as well as the other ones.
Yeah.
They're winners, but they're also losers. But I feel like we still give the losers like a fair perspective.
So someone left the comment of like a review or something, a comment that was like, "Oh, I like that you're like positive about a lot of stuff," but I also don't want to do that. Just be like, we like everything. I'm just trying to think more of like, that's why I don't want to be like a review thing, because it's weird to do like, I don't know. I'm not trying to evaluate it from like a should you buy this perspective. I'm more just trying to like, if we're playing a game we've never played before, it's like we're just trying to honestly react to how we felt about it in the year 2024. And it's just hard to get like, I don't know, there's no games we play that even the worst games, it's not like they don't make us mad, so maybe that's what it is. I feel like we're, there's plenty of bad games we've played, but it's just hard to be mad about them. So maybe that's what the person meant, because I don't think we're just like every game is good or anything.
Yeah, I think we've been critical of them, but we're still like, this isn't unplayable.
Yeah, or there's something charming about a lot of them. I don't know. We haven't played anything like that's like truly offended us necessarily.
Yeah, I keep hearing that those games are coming.
It's interesting, right? Because this is like Nintendo's like, oh no, our firm grip is actually the correct grip to have. We need to like have severe oversight over other people's like things because they're going to put them on our console. Whereas PlayStation is like, oh, you want to? Fuck it. Put it on. Release it. Ship it. Go for it. They're discs. It's cheap as hell to publish. Go for it. Yeah, why not? And that's a big reason why like the third party people kind of went over to PlayStation and sort of did whatever. And there are obviously a lot of huge, massive classics of the PlayStation. I'm not dismissing the PlayStation and their like very relaxed attitude. At the end of the day, you could argue it was the winning approach.
Oh yeah.
But Nintendo, like sort of like having like this prideful sort of thing. It's like, well, they only had 388 games published for the system, but their lows are not nearly as low as like the thousands of games published on the PlayStation that are like, one, who even knows about this game besides like a handful of people? Two, like, what the hell is this? So like it's interesting, but also the way that you guys approach stuff for your show, in my experience listening to it, is you guys take things as they are. You're not approaching it critically with like a modern 2024 lens with everything like that. I think you're just sort of like, what was the intention? We are playing with this in the intended format using, the proper equipment. What was going on here? And like you obviously like doing the broader cultural context puts you in that mindset of understanding.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it for sure, is like that. I guess that's another reason I like talking about that era, because I guess you look at the previous generation, like a lot of the SNES games, like a lot of rightfully considered like greatest of all time games, with like some of the RPGs they had, and Mario World and Metroid and Zelda, like those, and Donkey Kong. To this day, there's still games of that sort of variety that are launching themselves up to like the GOAT status or whatever. If they released a lot of them now, they would still be considered by the mainstream like really good. Like they would hold up, if that's the terminology, I guess. But what's interesting about this era of the early 3D gaming is there hasn't been sort of the established like this is the way to do things. So we're finding with every game like someone trying to tackle the 3D in a different way.
Yeah, it's not like, now you'll start a game and you'll most of the time already know how most of the controls work. You'll at least know how to move your character and how to move the camera. But what I was playing, it's like, okay, how do we do this in this game? Because there's not a standard, we're kind of seeing in real time how they're working out the quirks of 3D. That's why you won't hear us saying stuff like, oh, this did or didn't age well, because we're comparing it to things that are of the time and how they're progressing.
With certain games, you can almost, for the genre it's in or whatever, like the different controls do give them like more distinct feelings, I think, between games compared to now. It's a little bit more homogenized. Like some of them, it's like a fail. Like there's some failed, especially some of the 3D fighting games we've played that are trying to implement 3D. There's a lot of failures, but I don't know. In some, just comparing the first person games, for example, we've played between Turok and Doom and GoldenEye, Hexen, I guess, to some extent. Like there's almost a joy in like uncovering like what's the control scheme here, how do they want this to function, does it work or not. Like, so even when it doesn't fully work, it's too fun to be like too negative about it. It's just interesting. I don't know, it gives me delight.
What does the D-pad even do this game? Is the D-pad even an option in this game? Things of that nature.
We look up for some reason on the D-pad. Okay.
Yeah. It's fun to say that I played Turok left-handed because that control scheme made more sense to me.
There's so many random weird things we discover, like unique control schemes that you would never see. Even in racing games we're playing, there's something I would have never thought of, you know?
My favorite is GoldenEye dual-wielding two Nintendo 64 controllers.
Yes!
That is such an insane and brilliant solution that also sort of undoes itself because it's a 4-player experience in the multiplayer part.
Yeah. It doesn't work for that so much, but
it seems like you are very you're having this very healthy introspective relationship that isn't just rooted in nostalgia for the thing, but again rooted in a sense of coming to an understanding and appreciation beyond nostalgia, which is why I value your guys' podcast so much.
Thank you.
Moment of truth here. Would you guys say the Nintendo 64 is your favorite console?
You definitely are not, right?
No.
Because one thing...
No offense.
It's only your life.
You know.
Well, just in general, too, with our show, you're not as, like, nostalgic about that whole console as a whole, right? Like, you only really played a couple games.
Right. Mario Kart, Mario Party. I remember playing some of the other games, but I was like 5 and struggled through them like 1080. I remember being like, oh, this is so cool, but I could not play it.
And then for me, like there are a handful of non-Nintendo games I played, but I'm like a lot of people that when we talk to about the consoles, like it's pretty much all the big first party games were what we were there for. It might be close for me, but as we're going through, like I haven't even played a lot of the games we've talked about so far. But I don't know, what's your favorite?
Probably what console?
Yeah,
probably the Switch.
Oh, there we go. Yeah,
I mean, I've
always
really liked the handhelds and having a console that can play these bigger games but also still be handheld has just been awesome. And I've been able to play a ton of indie games on there too. So
yeah, just having a lot of those like that you can just pick up. Like that's how I play a lot of games now. It's just pick up the Switch, got it. Or I don't know. I download too many games,
Yeah.
I don't. My favorite though, it might be the GameCube actually. Just like in terms of like what I'm most nostalgic about, because my favorite Zelda games are those N64 ones that I played on N64, but I kept playing them through even more so on the collector's edition on the GameCube, and then that also had just a lot of other, like one of my other favorite games of all time is Resident Evil 4.
Nice.
And that I think was originally GameCube.
Yeah, it was originally for the GameCube before getting ported elsewhere because the GameCube wasn't as huge.
Oh yeah, but the Wii version, that was the best way to play it. I loved shooting and stuff, but I don't know. My favorite was maybe it's probably GameCube.
It's interesting because like those are probably among the two most common ones I get. Switch overwhelmingly so, but like GameCube is up there because it's an era that comes up a lot with I've had the Wind Waker episode, I've had the Metroid Prime episode. There's a strong, the Sonic Adventure 2 episode. There's a strong affection for this era, and it's kind of one of those things where it's like people who are into the GameCube ecosystem, pointing at myself, were into the GameCube ecosystem. Like there's a reason why like Paper Mario to Thousand Year Door getting a port is like this huge thing right now. It's because like there's there's the fervor around this era of game. And yes, I would probably sell a body part if I could like play Wind Waker on my TV again. That'd be awesome. But
oh yeah,
yeah,
it didn't quite WinBack stuff that the N64 lost, but I feel like you can think of more, like I guess Resident Evil, for example. I mean, they had RE2 on N64, but like I remember that was big. Like you could get a lot of the Resident Evil games on GameCube. I just remember there being slightly better selection on GameCube.
But they didn't have WinBack on GameCube, and that's why they didn't win back.
Yeah.
Bada bing.
Oh.
All right. That's a WinBack reference for the 6 of you who played WinBack.
For all the big WinBack heads out there.
You know, it's Metal Gear Solid on a Nintendo 64. Is it as good? Who's to say? The controller was weird on that console.
We have yet to experience that one.
I can't wait for you to talk about WinBack. I want to talk to you guys about your personal relationship with Pokemon before we get into the game proper. This is, like I said, the second time I've covered Pokemon on the show, and this still feels like a franchise that requires a little bit of context going in because it is enormous, and it's just important for me to get that stuff out of the way so we can just get into the personal of it. It's a game that became an immediate phenomenon as soon as it was shipped out to international territories because it provided multiple satisfying gameplay loops in an extremely simple package. Pokémon, an abbreviation of Pocket Monsters, began as a series of portable video games on the original Game Boy. The original subtitle for the series, Gotta Catch Them All, encouraged you to collect as many of the titular Pokemon as possible. You would also train the Pokemon you captured in battles to make them stronger, with most of them capable of evolving into bigger, stronger Pokemon. They traditionally evolve by leveling up via battle, though some evolve under special conditions, such as being given stones. You can carry up to 6 Pokemon at a time with you, and your character traditionally progresses through the games by battling 8 gym leaders, who are scattered throughout the region and give you badges to mark your progress on your journey. Collecting all 8 badges enables you to take on the ultimate challenge, the Elite Four, and defeating the Elite Four makes you the Pokemon champion and marks your status as the best Pokemon trainer in all the land. But, and I've said this before, the brilliant feature that turned Pokemon into a global phenomenon was the social part. Multiple versions of the game are released concurrently, which is why this episode is labeled Pokémon Red and Blue, with Pokemon exclusive to each version, meaning if you want to catch them all, you should connect with people who got other versions of the game. Originally, this was done via a Game Boy peripheral called the Link Cable that connected 2 devices together so you could trade Pokemon and battle one another. In fact, some Pokemon can only be evolved via trading. It was a brilliant strategy, and without that social component, I doubt the franchise would be even remotely as successful. Pokemon's the 3rd best-selling video game franchise of all time, only outsold by Mario and Tetris, selling approximately 480 million units across all games, not even counting the 1 billion plus downloads for mobile games like Pokemon Go, Pokemon Unite, Pokemon Masters EX, and so on. And as mentioned earlier, highest grossing media franchise of all time. The anime series is the most popular adaptation of a video game ever, having now run for nearly 1,300 episodes. Jesus Christ. And the Pokemon trading card game is the most successful trading card game series. There's numerous animated films, and the live-action Detective Pikachu film still stands as the 2nd highest grossing video game adaptation after the Super Mario Bros. Movie. That's Pokemon. But this isn't about Pokemon as a brand. It's about Pokemon as a vessel through which we enjoy and connect with one another. So what is y'all's relationship with Pokemon as an IP in general? Are you just game people? What was your engagement with it growing up, and what's your level of engagement with it now?
Pokemon Yellow was my first game. Since it was a handheld, I could take it outside and play with the neighbors across the street. I remember doing this less so with Pokemon Yellow and more with Ruby Sapphire, which came out, I was maybe 8 or 9 years old when that came out. And I had a neighbor who was the same age as me, and they would just take the handheld outside and we'd play, we'd do, some trading stuff. I think I played Pokemon Ruby so many times. Most of the games I played through like once, but that one in particular,
That's your
and
favorite,
probably right? yeah, as well as Yellow too. Just played tons and tons of times. Just start them over and over again. I've played, at least one from each of the generations. Started with Yellow and then had less experience with Gen 2 until Heart Gold Soul Silver came out. I remember playing my cousin's copy of Crystal for a little bit, but I didn't have it long enough to play through the whole thing. But, I was always getting the games as they came out, except for Yellow, which I was too young to get it when it first came out. Yeah, it's just been like a series that has stuck with me throughout my whole life. It feels like it's kind of advancing along with me, seeing it go from just this little 2D, basic sprites, smaller scale to now what it is now, which is just, for better or worse, like a big sprawling open world. Multiple storylines, tons of mechanics.
You every game that comes out is like a big event.
Yeah,
For you,
it's like I gotta get it the day it comes out.
Mhm.
Not doing anything else on that day. It's just we're playing Pokemon. Probably decide on my starter before I even get the game.
Yeah. It's a
Mhm.
very important decision, though. To be
Yeah,
fair.
it's always fun to get a new game and see all the new Pokemon, decide who I want on my team, because it's a very personal thing. Like you get 100, 200 to 200 new Pokemon every generation, but you just have a small set of them that you're going on this journey with and training up. And
Yeah. Like I've kind of played a couple of them here and there as they come out, but really it was the first gen that, I mean, I'm sure I'm like a lot of people where we played that and then, like whatever, it kept going and it just we didn't stick with it. But that time period specifically, it was like pretty much anything Pokemon I was into, because I think they came out when I was like 8 or 9. So I, even before because I got Yellow, which I think came out a year later, and even before that, it was just like that's what everyone did. The cards were there. I don't think we even knew how to play the game, even though it's very simple. People were
No one
just,
did.
look at these cool cards I got. So I think I even remember before getting Yellow, just a friend. I had a Game Boy and then a Game Boy Color. I remember a friend letting me borrow it, and he had the strategy guide for Blue, so I played it a little bit. But Yellow, that was really what did it for me, and that was, I was so engrossed in that because I was watching the anime, went and saw the movie when it came out. I played all the N64 games, Snap and Hey You Pikachu and all that stuff. I was super into it, and then I think when the next gen came out, Pokemon Yellow kind of like sort of satisfied me for a while to where I didn't even get those games. And then it was shortly after that where I both stopped really being as much of a handheld gamer, but also in like my pre-teens to teen years, I started to be more like, with a lot of stuff that I liked in the late 90s, early 2000s, where I was like self-conscious about it. I was like, oh, that shit's for kids, So Pokemon, like wrestling, stuff like that, I was very self-conscious about. So I kind of stopped being interested in that stuff. Occasionally over the years, one of the game, like I've played a handful of them, and every time I pick them up, they kind of satisfy that core loop that I remember of Red, Blue, and Yellow. And a lot of times I play them and I'm like, oh, that was Pokemon. That was, I got to have my little guys, pick my favorite little guys. But I often find when I finish them now, like, okay, that was good, I'm done. Like I find like now they have more post game and things like that, and I think it's just because I didn't stick with the series as much, and I don't have that sense of wonder anymore. But when I beat kind of the main storyline, become champion or whatever it is in the games, I'm sort of just like, I'm done. I don't get as engrossed in it as a lot of other people. I don't know. It's just not. Pokemon, it hasn't stuck with me as strongly, but at that time period, it was like everything. And I realized that is just because I was 8, 9, 10 years old. It had me. It had the grip on me.
Yeah. No. I mean, it's manufactured to just like appeal to like that brain. I don't think I talked about this when I did the Pokemon Emerald episode, but there was a chokehold that Pokemon had on my house. My brothers were 8 and 9 years older than me. I was born in 96. They were born in 87 and 88. So I was sort of born into like this. I was 2 years old when Pokemon came to America, and I just remember it always being around. We had the VHS of the first movie. We'd watch the anime all the time. All the games were in the house. My brothers had the Game Boys and the Game Boy Colors. So I was just immersed in this stuff. Apparently, there was a brief period of time where Pokemon was banned in our household because we had an evangelical mother who initially heard that this was trafficking in satanic messages.
Oh, yeah.
And then she watched an episode and is like, oh, this is normal. This is just normal kid stuff. Okay, carry on. And then like double down, all in. It's going to be a religion now, Mom.
My cousins couldn't play Pokemon. They couldn't play Pokemon or watch Harry Potter.
Yeah.
But they also got to watch, like, because they're like super Catholic, but they got to watch a bunch of like violent movies that I didn't get to watch. And maybe it's because they like, now you hear about like, oh, the satire, people don't get the satire, but they got to watch Starship Troopers. And they were like 7 years old and they got to watch Starship Troopers. I was always so jealous. But then I could play Pokemon and watch Harry Potter for some reason.
It's fine to watch Face Off. Nicolas Cage is dressed as a priest. It's fine.
Don't worry about it.
It's fine. Yeah, no, I mean, it's just funny. I mean, I guess the Harry Potter thing aged well in the general arc of history in terms of having that banned. But no, Pokemon's normal. It's everywhere. It was just a very funny thing that happened. And I'm sure there's parents who are still afraid of Pikachu to this day, which is just funny because he's everywhere. What are y'all's favorite Pokemon? Do y'all have a favorite Pokemon?
Favorite Pokemon?
I always say two of them, but I say Ponyta and Eevee.
Love it.
Because I was a horse girl growing up, and I don't know, Eevee has just always been. I've always thought it was cool, all the evolutions it had, and even it's in just its like normal form, it's so cute. Like that could be like your pet.
Yeah.
Yeah, Eevee was like that one where it was like that was one of the planned intended mascot Pokemon before they settled on Pikachu, and you can totally see why. I mean, they finally got it with Let's Go Eevee.
Yeah.
They got there. What about you, Gooey? What's your favorite?
I think now, you know what I tend to find now is that like in any game I play, when I got my team that I'm building, I always tend to gravitate towards like the big dudes, you know, like any like the Nidokings and I like Arcanine. Like we were watching a little bit of that one anime and the Giovanni, like he had all these big hulking ground type Pokemons. And I'm like, yeah, the big hosses, you know. I don't know what
Rhydon
it is.
and
Rhydon, yeah. I like the big boys.
Nidoking was my favorite as a kid. My brothers had like the complete Gen 1 set of Pokemon cards, and I just admired that Nidoking. Like that was a great Pokemon.
Oh yeah.
Nowadays I'd say Ampharos is my favorite. Also a huge fan of Umbreon, but Pokemon's great. I see a case for basically every Pokemon being somebody's favorite. I remember the creator saying, like, is there a Pokemon that you feel like it's forgotten? Maybe it was Sugimori or somebody, but he's like, I don't know. I feel like people don't fuck with Tangela as much as I do.
The sprite for Tangela in the original games is so awesome. It's so. I think I'm so like, you know, like biased, like Gen 1 build or whatever, that like I totally have the thing where I see it's that the hello human resources meme, but for like anything past first gen, where I'm like, I look at, you know, the weirdest Pokemon from Gen 1 and I'm like, classic, perfect, or whatever. Then I see, you know, the ice cream one or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, that's the one everyone thinks. And I'm like,
or the trash.
No, but there have been some later ones that have grown on me. Like I realize that's another case of I'm just purely biased about my childhood for sure. All 150 are classic to me though from that period.
Yeah,
perfect.
If you want to look at like, you know, these things objectively, there's plenty of like, you know, designs that are equally, if not more so, like, you know, better designs than that original 151. Like there's some like I'd beat that Pokemon to death with hammer stuff in season 1. What the fuck is Bellsprout? I'm so scared.
True.
But at the same time, like Bellsprout is perfect, and I don't want to beat him to death with a hammer, actually. So I have just a strong affection, obviously, as somebody who grew up with this stuff, has fondness for like those first few seasons of Pokemon. We had a VHS of like 3 episodes as a kid, and one of them was the Ponyta racing episode where it evolves into Rapidash when he's like coming up onto the finish line. I'm like, so that is Pokemon to me. Is that stuff?
The anime was huge. Like, did you watch a lot of the anime?
No.
Okay.
I remember watching the first two movies like fairly often enough. I think I
Mhm.
saw one of maybe 2000 in theaters.
I don't remember what year it was, but it's like a cozy nostalgic memory of it being Thanksgiving, and they whatever channel it was airing a Pokemon marathon, and I just remember
Yeah.
being home
It's
for Thanksgiving, watching Pokemon all day.
it's funny that you say Thanksgiving because I always think of Pokemon as coming out like releasing around Thanksgiving. So I would
Mhm.
always be playing the games while we had
Oh
our Thanksgiving, break happening.
Mhm.
yeah,
And look, Pikachu's in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade every year.
yeah,
Yeah.
We love him for it. They own that. That's his day. That's Pikachu's day.
Mhm.
love to see him. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that one thing I want to ask you, McKenna, because you're pretty hard in the paint for this Pokemon stuff. What is your attitude towards the spin-off games? I'm a big mystery dungeon guy myself, but I want to know what your attitudes about the spin-offs are.
I haven't really done much with the spin-offs. I think Pokemon Conquest is the one that I really played the most. I really got into that one too. I don't know what it was about it because I hadn't played any games like that before. I'd probably be more interested in getting into them now. I think it was more maybe I was less aware of them when they came out. Yeah,
what's
I've mostly done the mainline stuff.
Conquest? You said, is that the one that's like the tactics one?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
I refuse to play that game because I only play historically accurate games with regards to Japanese history, and Oda Nobunaga did not have a black Rayquaza, so I refuse to play that game because Japanese
Unders-
history is important and honorable.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
I,
Continue.
Yeah.
I did get into that actually. I had a friend lend me that one, and that's another genre of game that I like a ton in theory, but like some of the big games in that, like I haven't actually played, but that totally like had me through at least the main storyline of that, because that style of gameplay was awesome.
I haven't really played recently, but I played Pokemon Go a lot, even past when it's like
That
popular,
was
it's real
huge. Yeah.
popularity. I've
Hmm.
probably played that consistently for maybe 3 years, probably while I was in college because I was, walking around on campus so much and there were tons of Pokestops and gyms and it was just easy to play. And then at some point I, left college and was not walking around an area that had lots of Pokestops, and so I kind of stopped. I got out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, a
Yeah,
similar thing with. I didn't play it that long, but the like month at least that it came out, like that was pretty magical. It captured, and it had that social element that
yeah,
was for me actually that was even more social than the original games, because you would just go to a park and there's dozens of people there.
hmm
Oh yeah, absolutely. That it was incredible. It was truly like the euphoria of the summer of 2016 versus oh
hmm
god, oh god, oh god for the rest of the next few
Right.
yeah.
months.
Maybe
But
that's what did it. Maybe that's why I stopped. I don't know.
Pokemon Go to the polls, everybody.
Oh God, yeah. Oh man.
What a time. I feel like that was like, oh no, is the party over? Is it over?
I have a weird hang up with it. I've told you about it, and it's really weird, and I know it's not logical. This and a little bit in the Legends game. I know I get like the there would be no game if it didn't have this, but there's something about the Pokemon games where you have to catch a ton of them. I don't like. I feel like I'm out there farming Pokemon, and I know in the world of Pokemon we're basically fighting these creatures against each other, but I buy into the lore of like it's like athletic competition. You're fighting alongside them, that Pokemon want to compete. But there's something that just always feels so wrong where it's like I had to catch 100 Rattata to upgrade my Rattata or like evolve them. I feel like I'm farming these creatures. It's sickening to me. I know it's probably illogical, but that's not the loop. I catch my guy, and he, even if I don't use him, even if he's just sadly sitting in someone's PC somewhere, he's my little guy. And I don't,
hmm
I've never cared about like the strategies of the game or like what is it, IVs or whatever to get the good.
IVs and EVs.
I
Yeah.
catch my guy, and he's my guy. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care. So I know that's like, I never got into the competitive aspect of Pokemon on that level. Like, I liked battling on Pokemon Stadium, where you just kind of, you could pick the teams. You could sometimes import your guys, but I never really cared about, like, I need to find the right Pokemon. I would just catch my guy, and he's my guy. He's my special little guy. I don't want to catch anymore, you know?
You don't want to feel like the relationship you have with the one is being
we're bonding.
Compromised because you have 100 million of them. I get it. I understand that. But then you also think about like the other inverse of it, where it's like, instead of giving a bunch of little guys a home, I'm just beating the shit out of them to make my guy strong.
Yeah, no, certainly. I can't. You just go through the fields and find piles of Rattatas or whatever. Hey, they disappear when I beat them. I don't know what happens.
Oh, you're gonna make me and my friends so much closer together, buddy.
Yeah, that's fair. Maybe that does. Okay, I like it better now. I'm into it.
You're giving them a home. They're hanging out. Like, if you ever watch the anime, like the way they like rationalize it is like they're hanging out at Professor Oak's place, and they're on a farm. They're chilling.
They're on a farm somewhere. Don't worry.
Ash is like 30 Tauros, and they're all chilling. They're fine. Yeah,
that's fair.
Let's talk about the main event here. We have two people here. Let's talk about two video games: Pokemon Red and Blue. Pokemon Red and Blue are the first entries in the Pokemon franchise. These are the games that started it all, and would propel them to becoming the highest-grossing media franchise of all time. The games were developed by Game Freak and published by Nintendo. Though primitive by today's standards, this was one of the most ambitious titles on the Game Boy in both scope and scale. The game was designed by and directed by Satoshi Tajiri, who was inspired by his childhood memories of collecting insects as a child. Satoshi noticed as his town became more urban, people spent more time inside, and he wanted to create a game that represented the feelings he got from collecting insects as a kid. The concept evolved into collecting creatures, naming them, and controlling them. Pocket monsters, as they came to be known, even battle with one another, but they don't die, they can only faint, as Tajiri did not want to create excessive violence and stress in a game meant to inspire joy. Satoshi was one of the default names you could choose for your character in the original Japanese release of the game. The character is now canonically known as Red. The protagonist of the anime, though, who English speakers know as Ash Ketchum, is called Satoshi in the Japanese dub.
Oh, that's cool.
The artist, he's literally named after the game's creator.
Aw.
The artists for Pokemon Red and Blue were Atsuko Nishida and Satoshi Tajiri's close friend, Ken Sugimori. Tsunekazu Ishihara served as a producer of the game, providing a cash infusion through his company Creatures Inc. in order to assist the struggling Game Freak complete the game. Ishihara is now the president of the Pokemon Company. It was his extensive involvement in the licensing of Pokemon that brought about the card game, the anime, and so on. Shigeru Miyamoto, for most people, probably needs no introduction, creator of Mario, Donkey Kong, The Legend of Zelda, and so on, served as the producer of this game. It was Miyamoto who encouraged Game Freak to develop Pokemon, despite them finding Satoshi Tajiri's concept too ambitious. Shigeru was one of the optional names you can select for your rival in the original Japanese release, now canonically known as Blue, and the character from the anime we now know as Gary Oak is known as Shigeru in the Japanese dub.
That's sick. That's cool.
Yeah. So it's like he was Satoshi's mentor and everything like that, and it's just like interesting that another facet of Miyamoto's career is that he is immortalized as this bastard boy in the anime forever. The concept of trading Pokemon came about because of Tajiri's frustration with acquiring a rare item in Dragon Quest II that Ken Sugimori had two of, but of course he had no way of trading the item with him on the Famicom. This inspired the idea of trading Pokemon with one another using the Game Boy Link cable, and Shigeru Miyamoto suggested releasing different versions of the game with exclusive Pokemon in each one, hence why each generation has two versions. Featuring nearly an hour of original music composed by Junichi Masuda, who was able to create all of the game's sound effects, Pokemon cries, and melodies on just 4 sound channels, as that was all the Game Boy was capable of. The Kanto region, in which this game is set, is based on the real-life Kanto region in Japan, considered the center of Japan's economy and politics, as it is where their capital and largest city, Tokyo, is located. It is a geographically diverse region with mountains, forests, rivers that connect to the Pacific Ocean, and the Kanto Plains, the largest plain of Japan, covering about 1,700 square kilometers. This geographically diverse region is represented in-game with the various caves, forests, and fields and plateaus the player character explores between settlements. The plot of Pokemon Red and Blue is bare bones, but provides the template for mainline entries moving forward. Your player character, canonically named Red, lives in the small, quiet Palace Town. You're invited to Professor Oak's laboratory after attempting to leave your hometown without a Pokemon to protect you. There, Professor Oak, a researcher of Pokemon, invites you and your next-door neighbor and his grandson, your rival, canonically named Blue, to choose a starter Pokemon for your journey ahead. The options before you are Charmander, a fire type, Bulbasaur, a grass type, and Squirtle, a water type. Which Pokemon do you choose?
What do you think?
Well, I know I'm choosing Ponyta later, so it's not Charmander.
So you're like, no fire needed.
Yeah, that's covered. I'm like a definitely cover all your type bases, like don't repeat kind of person. Who would I have picked? Bulbasaur?
I would probably do the same, honestly. When I was young, I would have probably Charizard. That's one like Pikachu where it's just everywhere. But when I was young, definitely was like that was the coolest one to me. Honestly had like I remember some memorable storylines in the anime, Charizard in particular. But I think now, in adulthood, I'm more mature. I understand that Bulbasaur is the coolest of the starters.
Look, I'm a basic guy. I cannot deny my roots. I was a fire type starter for basically all the way until X and Y. And then I was like, well, hang on, this Froakie guy is kind of cool. Oh my god, he evolves into a ninja frog. Greninja, that's water shuriken. Okay, yeah, let's do it. So that was the thing that finally broke that streak for me. But I was traditionally a fire type guy for a while. But there's really no bad choice in this like selection here. I think they're all unimpeachable. I'm wearing a Squirtle shirt now. Love the guy.
Oh, he's adorable. Yeah,
he's adorable. It's just funny because like the game kind of punishes you for choosing Charmander because you have to go through those first 2 gyms, the rock type and the water type, and it's like, all right, I'm powering through though. I'm stubborn like that.
Bulbasaur definitely gives you an edge, right? Because you've got rock, then water, right? So
yeah, got the type advantage.
And electricity is not very effective against grass either. So you kind of power through Lieutenant Surge too.
That's like it's like a lot of the Pokemon games. I feel like you could probably get through a lot of them with like 1 or 2 Pokemon, really. Like or maybe like I often would find like, especially as it goes on, you like it's easier to figure out the types. Like it'll tell you if you've done a move, if it's effective against a certain type. It's like as you go on, like I mean, it's more fun to like kind of spread it out and raise the different guys. But that's kind of like honestly one of the things I like about the game is that like if you're just pressing buttons, like you could probably get through it eventually. You know, like that's definitely how I got through it.
Twitch plays Pokemon.
Twitch plays Pokemon, right? Yeah,
yeah.
When I was like 8 or 9 or whatever, like. I don't know. I've never been really like adept like RPGs. I never played a lot, so like it's like kind of a good beginner in that way, like a baby can be.
Yeah. I managed to beat Brock with my Pikachu.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
It was a struggle, but I did it.
I'm pretty sure that's what Ash does in the anime. I think he does something like trigger like the fire alarm and then the sprinklers turn on.
Yes,
if I remember that correctly.
The anime does give you a false idea of like what the game is actually like, which
he like douses the Onyx in water and then it does thunder shock and he like basically water tortures him.
Oh god, it's a viable strategy. Only
yeah.
When will we get a Pokemon that can do that, Game Freak? All right. No, I'm not one of those. Anyway, your rival always picks the Pokemon with the type advantage over you. The 2 of you engage in battle. Regardless of the outcome, you 2 are sent to travel across the Kanto region to challenge the Pokemon League, collect the 8 gym badges, and challenge the Elite Four to become Pokemon Champion. Along the way, you keep running into your rival, Blue, as well as the nefarious Team Rocket, who believe Pokemon to be tools rather than creatures who should live harmoniously with people. Shenanigans ensue. Pokemon Red and Blue were released in North America on September 28, 1998. Other games released in 1998 include acclaimed titles such as Half-Life, Metal Gear Solid, Resident Evil 2, legendary RPGs such as Baldur's Gate, Fallout 2, Panzer Dragoon Saga, Parasite Eve, Xenogears, Game Boy titles like The Legend of Zelda, Link's Awakening DX, Wario Land 2, and acclaimed Nintendo 64 titles such as Banjo-Kazooie, F-Zero X, Star Wars Rogue Squadron, Turok 2, Seeds of Evil, and, of course, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time.
Oh, yeah.
I know you guys are doing
thriving.
the Flashback 64 thing. Besides, Ocarina of Time, which we've spent so much time discussing today, have you played the games mentioned just now?
Well, one thing is we only do one game a month, so we're not
Oh, one or two.
1 or 2 or 3 sometimes. We don't want to overdo it. But if we find time to talk about other things, we're filling out the weeks in between with other stuff. But because of that, we're moving at a very slow pace. We're only in 1997. But one thing that's fun is we're looking at Nintendo Power and stuff like that, and they are talking about like, oh, there's this game that just released in Japan, Pocket Monsters. Like, it's going to be a big deal when it comes over here, and like they were right. But yeah, a lot of those other 98 games, like a lot of the big N64 games, I definitely were big for me. I mean, Zelda especially. Some of the other ones, like you described, like Metal Gear Solid. That was one thing I've mentioned on our show is like the cousin game where my cousins who could play Starship Troopers and or watch it and they could watch Armageddon. I wasn't allowed to watch Armageddon. They had the PS1, and so I'd go and be blown away by watching them play Metal Gear, and just I would be so jealous, and I knew like my Nintendo 64 was not as cool. So yeah, that was mainly my experience with those games.
I'm sorry,
Link's
really
Awakening.
quickly before McKenna, this is the cousin that was not allowed to play Pokemon, right?
Yeah.
So like
exactly.
they could play Metal Gear, nuclear proliferation, the end, and then like, but that's where they drew the line.
It's too much. Yeah. They
Right.
I don't know, as long as they had the right things behind, like, I don't know if they thought it was like holy. I don't know what they did. They were like anything with the military, they're like, oh, the military is cool, we like the military. So they wouldn't really. That's why Starship Troopers would get a pass, even though they're not looking at all below the surface level.
This is just like one of my Japanese animes. But can I continue?
Yeah, not a ton of experience with those games yet, although that's coming up very soon in our podcast timeline. I've mentioned Ocarina of Time, but also Link's Awakening DX. I think that was maybe the first 2D Zelda I played. Big fan of Link's Awakening. It's such a cool, weird little Zelda game that really, I think we've talked about, doesn't get enough credit for establishing a lot of stuff that carries forward in the series.
A lot of the conventions in there for sure.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit. There's like this like very interesting like nostalgic feeling associated with Pokemon, especially for people of our general age group here. But the other games you presented to me were games like Link's Awakening, Ocarina of Time, Skyward Sword. But Pokemon was like the first like non-Zelda game you suggested as like something. So like, I know for you, McKenna, this is like one of the first games you remember playing. What else is like within you when you think about like, oh, I could talk about Pokemon like in a format like this?
I always love a game where I guess you're doing this in a lot of games, but it just feels like this, you're setting out on your first big adventure. You're exploring the world with your own like chosen group of little guys. I think exploration, maybe it's not something people think of as much with Pokemon, but I just always love arriving in a town and getting to go in all the buildings and talk to everybody and learn more stuff about the world. It's just like, all right, this is this video game world that's like different from my own world that I get to experience new things in.
We were talking like Well, we talk about it all the time, but like on our walk, we were taking a walk today down the trail. For usually you bring up Breath of the Wild, but
Yeah.
you made the connection today about how Zelda and Pokemon,
Mhm.
as you mentioned in your description, Kiefer, that like they're both inspired by the creator's, sense of like discovery when you're a child,
Mhm.
Like Miyamoto was clearly like hearing that concept and like standing up and it's just like, I went outside as a kid too. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. You know about outside too?
Have you seen Sticks? That was though, like when I think of my childhood of like playing with my brother or friends or whatever, like I do just think of either picking up sticks in the backyard and throwing nuts, like Zelda, Kokiri Forest. Like a lot of the weapons and things like you get there are like just practical things you can find out in the woods if you happen to live near the woods. Like seeds and nuts and sticks. And I just remember, whacking each other with sticks and stuff like that. And then Pokemon gives me like that same sense of wonder, like we do when we walk around town. Especially, it might just be for me the nostalgia, but the first gen, it's like way simple that it's even though it's set in a region based on Japan, it's like really easy to start to imagine your world around you
Mhm.
as like being the Pokemon world. We do that on walks all the time, like when we talk about like, oh,
Yeah,
this
we
would
like
be
walk over there's a river by us, and we walk over the bridge, and the trail is like surrounded by forests. And I was like, oh, this is like Viridian Forest. Like
and what do we
we just walked
see?
into this totally forest enclosed area.
And we see a guy out on his boat fishing or people cycling. It's like all the trainer types and things like that are just things you would encounter in your day-to-day life. It's like it's fantastical, but it's like very down to earth.
Grounded.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I've said this before. I believe that like the pixel minimal style is a lot more my conception of what the Pokemon games should be, just because like there's that like factor that you're leaving to your own imagination and filling in those blanks. Like it is, you understand like how this is based off Kanto and like where Tokyo fits in and all this and like the topography of everything, but it's just that like that thing where it's like you are able to like project your own sense of the world into this little tiny game on your handheld device, and you yourself are like going all over the world. Like I was a kid who like, oh, this city has like brick ground like Goldenrod City or anything like that, so like every time I walk on like a street that has like bricks on it, I'm like, much like my familiar stomping ground Goldenrod City.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, like you can't help but like have that associate. It's probably like why Pokemon Go is like such a big deal, because there's this like actual aspect of exploring and familiarizing yourself with your environment, and there's Pokemon there now. It's perfect. It's kind of like something the series is like promoting exploration in your own real world by like making that association. Like like you said, Gooey, like this stuff has gotten a bit more convoluted in the plot department, and I feel different ways about it. I like that and I don't like that in different ways. And not because like I'm pro or against anything, just because like this is a series that's grown up, and that's not a
Mhm.
bad thing. But I do think that is a sticking point for a lot of people, because it's like this was one thing when I was a kid, and now it's more convoluted and complex as I'm an adult. And hey, that's fundamentally life. Fundamentally, life is a thing that gets more and more complicated as you progress. So I think Pokemon
True.
is implanting a lesson in us in our own way. But still, the innocence of these first generation or two, it is completely reasonable to see why this became this massive runaway success for a generation of kids.
Oh yeah. They couldn't just do the same thing every time. So I get we on our show we went through and we watched all the James Bond movies for
Mhm.
GoldenEye purposes. We watched them all, and like I think Pokemon has a similar thing, even though it's in these fantasy worlds of like, where's this one going to be set, or where are they going to go? And it like as they go on, like they do start to, I think, even more so lean into like you start to get to like here's like these weird British versions of the Pokemon. Here's coughing with a monocle, or I can't remember what they did with those, but
Mhm.
what I
Yeah,
mean. They
yeah.
start to lean into those, and they make it sort of a travelogue type series. But there was some like what really captures my sense of wonder, even today, like to this day, even though I don't play Pokemon a ton. Like I said, we go on walks, and I still like sometimes have just like these fantasies about like, oh, what if Pokemon were real? You know,
Yeah.
that person would have a Growlithe, not a golden retriever.
Yeah,
You know?
that bee would be so much more threatening,
Right,
or way cuter. You know, it could go either way there.
that person would be on a Lapras instead of a boat.
Yeah, no, British coughing with like a top hat and monocle is like the unproblematic version of how like in You Only Live Twice, Sean Connery does Yellowface. So
yeah,
this is what a Japanese guy going to Britain is like, and then this is what a Scottish guy going to Japan is like. Oh no,
Pokemon might at times capture like actually be more culturally sensitive than, well, actually not even might be. It's like definitely more culturally sensitive than James Bond. They should dunk on England some more, though. They could take it. They could take it.
Yeah, they can handle it. You guys love soccer so much, don't you? You little fucks. You like it when things are big over there in the West, don't you? Before we talk about Pokemon some more, I do want to talk about the ways in which people are able to actually play games like Pokemon Red and Blue these days in a segment I like to do every episode called No Country for Old Games. Before we talk more about Pokemon Red and Blue, we have to talk about how readily available this game is so those who are interested in playing it can check it out. Because the subject of video game preservation means a great deal to me, I believe that video games are an art form and create experiences that leave some kind of impact on the people who play them. Unfortunately, this means very little publishers who have historically struggled with keeping their older games available on modern hardware. As time goes on, games that were once easily readily available to purchase and play become more and more difficult to acquire. And I'm sure you guys can relate to this as somebody playing, somebody doing a podcast about a now 28-year-old console. In today's segment, we're going to rate today's game's availability on a scale of A to ARG. And ARG is obviously an expression of frustration and how hard it is to acquire a game, and it is not me covertly advocating for piracy, which is illegal. If you like the game, buy it or die. Pocket Monsters Red and Green were released in Japan on February 27th, 1996, with Pocket Monsters Blue releasing later that year on October 15th, 1996. This version of Blue contained updated in-game artwork and new dialogue, and originally could only be purchased via a mail order to subscribers of Kodokodo Comic before getting a general retail release in Japan in October of 1999. The code, script, and art from this Pokemon Blue was used for the international release of Pokemon, which would be titled Pokemon Red and Blue. There was no international release of Green. These games would release in North America 2.5 years after Pokemon originally debuted in Japan on September 28th, 1998. Pokemon Yellow, an enhanced version of Pokemon Red and Blue, was released in 1998 in Japan, North America in 1999, Europe in 2000. This version followed the format laid out in Pokemon Red and Blue with changes to resemble the ongoing anime, including being given a Pikachu as a starter, or with your rival being given an Eevee. The traditional starter Pokemon would be given to you throughout the events of the game. The anime's Jesse and James from Team Rocket also appeared as recurring characters in this version. So far, we have multiple different versions of Pokemon internationally, and this is as easy as it gets. In 2004 in America, 2003 in Japan, they release a remake for the Game Boy Advance called Pokemon Fire Red and Pokemon Leaf Green, which is crazy to think about, just 7 years or even 6 years apart to get a remake for a video game, because that would be like if they did a remake of Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee now, which is also another remake of Pokemon Yellow, limited to just the original 151 Pokemon Let's Go Eevee, Let's Go Pikachu, released for the Switch, and implemented features from Pokemon Go. And like the history of like how this original game though, and how you play these games is complicated. The Game Boy Advance was backwards compatible with Game Boy games, so that wasn't an issue if you had the cartridges. But Game Boy cartridges are no longer traditionally in circulation, certainly not making new ones. And these games did get ported digitally on the Nintendo 3DS, but that eShop is no longer open. So you are not able to purchase and play even the digital versions of these games. As of right now, they do have a Game Boy Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance section on the Nintendo Switch Online service. But as of right now, as of the time of this recording, there are no Pokemon games on those services. Specifically, not the Pokemon mainstream games. You can play the trading card game. You can play the trading card
Right.
game on the Game Boy.
That's suspect to me. That seems like a no-brainer, you know?
Yeah.
And I think this is, it's about IP. It's about brand. It's functionally, if you want to play a Gen 1 experience, you play Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee. Or they want you to play like the most modern version of a Pokemon experience. They have so many Pokemon games on the Switch that they want you to buy and play. Why would like a typical person want to play these classic games? And the answer is kind of undone by the fact that you put Pokemon trading card game for the Game Boy on the Switch Online service. So why not the other stuff? It's weird. It's very, very, very. I can play Pokemon Puzzle League on the Nintendo 64 service, but I can't play any mainline Pokemon games.
Nintendo usually they usually catch a lot of flack for, especially now after there's no more eShop, for how they kind of present and preserve these games or whatever, and it's rightful. I think like a lot of the criticisms are very valid, but at the very least, like a lot of those games, if you're like some of those bigger games, they're at least presenting you with a way to like play them, like Mario 64 or some of those games.
Mm-hmm.
But with Pokemon, it's like it's very frustrating if you want to try to play the actual original game, which I don't get. Like you can play, like they put Ocarina of Time on there, but not they're not worried about if you're playing Ocarina of Time 3D or whatever. Maybe that's like a different thing, but it's very frustrating that they kind of try to replace the games, or like there's something that's preventing them from letting people play them.
Because like Ocarina of Time, the original, is so much closer to 3D or the 3DS version than the Let's Go games are to Red and Blue.
Yeah, well, maybe that's why. I don't know.
Like they're very different experiences, and I don't think like one really takes away from the other.
Yeah.
The only thing I can really think about is like they want these games to be played as intended with like the social component, and there's like programming they would have to do to make that multiplayer aspect work on the Switch. So I'm sympathetic to that to an extent, because they certainly had to do a lot of work to port the games onto the 3DS, for example, and then that work was kind of, now they've closed the 3DS eShop, so like they don't really have that in there. So I am not saying like it would take them zero work to put it on there, but I think just simply having the option to play these games in an archival sense is what is also significant. And obviously that's a bigger conversation about consoles and form factor and everything like that. But it is just like this very unfortunate thing where like the foundational titles for this franchise are just simply unavailable right now. Arg, this is so frustrating.
Yeah, I guess ARG is probably, I feel like it's like, I guess at least there's some version of it out there you can play, but it's like not that game at all. Let's Go is not.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah.
At least they present you some way to play that world gen, but no, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's even like the story's different. Like they've changed things there, so it's not really like you're going through the same world and you have the same general plot, but it's a totally different experience.
Yeah, like it functions as like if you want an introduction to Pokemon as a layman, or are you a child who just like likes Pokemon but doesn't want the challenges of a more robust modern title, here's a playground for you to experience that. And that's cool. I like that. I like the idea of that. But again, there's just the idea of like if you want to experience the true originals, there's not really an official option for that at the moment. That is very frustrating and difficult to deal with. And I understand like, there's also resolution and everything like that. I'm always like looking at like what the handheld market is doing. There's like a new clamshell type handheld that resembles the Game Boy Advance SP that just came out a couple weeks ago.
Oh.
And people are going crazy for it. And it's just like, wow, would love to play Pokemon on that thing.
I was doing it the way I did back in the day, which was through the transfer pack on my N64 on Pokemon Stadium.
Yeah.
That's such a cool way. And that this would be probably more worth than it's worth. But the fact that that's on NSO and you can go to that building or like, hover over it, but you can't do anything with it. I'm like, maybe just put the Pokemon in that. Can you do that? Get one here.
And it would be conducive to that experience too, right? Because I was just complaining about like, maybe Nintendo really wants people to play these games like fully as realized, but then again, like they have Pokemon Stadium on there on the NSO, and that is a game that's functionally a companion to the handheld games because you're able to transfer data from those games back and forth in this interesting iterative way and like trade things through it. But that functionality is not really there because there's no interactive stuff. Like they've done stuff with like Golden Sun and the Legend of Zelda games, Oracle of Ages and Seasons, to make those compatible within the service. But it's just like, guys, let's figure out Pokemon. Let's figure out Pokemon, guys.
It's not the best for the archival nature, the services, right? Because it's not, you don't own the games or whatever.
Yeah.
But I would also like it if they sold them like the games on their own. But there are some like great things about that service. Like we do it all the time. We do streams and videos and stuff where we play on the N64. You can get other people to come just where you're all in the service together, and it basically treats everyone like you've got your controller plugged into the port, and you can bounce between games and play a variety of games together, or you can change who's player one. So we played through Mario, and we're basically passing the controller to our friends online. And I feel like there are a lot of like, they don't even advertise it as well as they should. I feel like they should advertise that. And I feel like the interactivity there goes hand in hand with Pokemon. Like, I feel like the service could be like a lot better. Like they could make more of it. But that's, again, that plus the lack of archival, like I totally see your ARG for sure.
Yeah. It's full on an ARG. I'm saving all the rant I give every time I talk about Nintendo games with the Nintendo Switch Online because we're already 2 hours into this episode, this recording.
Yeah.
Look, the legacy, and I guess you already answered my question about how you revisit this game with the transfer pack. McKenna, do you do the same thing? How do you experience the classics?
You can't say.
Well, ARG.
Never mind. Never mind.
I still have my my Game Boy Color with Pokemon Yellow, so I could,
it's the Pokemon.
Yeah, I have like the bag that it.
Yeah.
We both own the game. Let's just say that.
Yeah, we still have. Yeah. We held on to our old games.
Well, I don't have my yellow. I have blue for some reason. I don't know where.
Yeah,
I don't know where that came from, but that's what I have for some reason.
Luckily, I've like held on to most of my games.
Yeah.
The legacy of these games are self-evident. The strength of these games kicked off a global sensation, and that changed the world. 18 years after the release of these games, Hillary Clinton would advise voters to Pokemon Go to the polls. Everybody knows Pokemon. Everybody knows Pokemon. Pokemon Red, Blue, Green, and Yellow collectively were the best-selling game on the Game Boy, with 46 million cartridges sold, outselling even the launch title Tetris, despite Tetris coming out in 1989 and these games coming out in 1996, 1998, 1999 in some territories. So like that lead time, and it's interesting to think like, how can something that had 46 million units out there be so expensive on the aftermarket? And it's like, I have a business degree. I could be like, oh, supply, demand, line, intersection, demand, quality, But at the end of the day, like, look, it's not like there can't be millions of these things in a dumpster somewhere. Where are they?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well,
how many closets and attics are these games just being housed in?
Yeah, I just wonder if it's like a lot of people, if that's like the only game they got. Like the reason it was so big is because it was like another toy, like one of the big toys. Like it was every year at school we had something that got banned, because everyone was obsessed with it. And so maybe, I don't know, maybe because they were all in the grubby hands of 7-8-year-olds, like maybe they didn't take care of them as well. I don't know. I'm just trying to think like you're off-roading them, out on a camping trip. I don't know.
Mr. Beast is just like, I destroyed 600,000 cartridges just to feel something.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining, like, I mean, people are being so people forgetting that these are in their homes and cartridges are just like in various storage places somewhere, and that's probably it. But it's just weird. It's just weird. But we're not here to talk about how weird it is to find an old cartridge and formats and archives and the legacy of this game, how many copies it sold. We're not here to talk about the 2016 election. We're here to talk about Pokemon Red and Blue and the impact on the people who played these Pokemon games. So let's get into it, gang.
Welcome to the best idea for a podcast of all time. This is Champs in the Making,
a Pokemon bracket podcast where we take every one of these creatures in the Pokemon video game franchise,
put them in a bracket together and find out which one the best one is.
Starmie gives me like organic, free-range, gluten-free, like fidget spinner energy.
Swallow can swallow a tire whole in one gulp.
Ladybug looks like it is ready to give you so many high fives with each of its little mitten hands.
I don't like Weird Ear's face.
It's got a big testicle for a nose, for sure.
I think Nidoking's favorite beer is PBR.
Okay.
Champs in the Making, a Moonshot Network podcast about Pokemon. Find it wherever you listen to podcasts or first at patreon.com/Moonshot Network.
What do you all love about these games, Pokemon Red, Blue, even Yellow, and what do you like about them that you wish more video games would do?
Ooh, that's a good question.
You've hit on this like beautiful point earlier about the exploration aspect of it and like the adventure and like this world out there.
Mm-hmm.
That's like your number one
thing
is, with a lot of games,
right? Yeah, I'm big into the exploration aspect, and I actually feel like that's something, even with like the open world of Scarlet and Violet, like it felt like it was missing a bit because I couldn't just go into a town and go into all the places and talk to everyone. They kind of, they've kind of lost their soul a little bit because you can't even go into a lot of the houses, and a lot of the NPCs now don't have their own cool dialogue.
Yeah, that was definitely lacking.
Yeah,
for me, and like there is sort of like, I know I was at peak immersion, like I said, because I was a little kid or whatever, but I think the gameplay itself in all the games is simple, which is fine. For me, like it is about just like, it's one of the few games I play where I'm just sort of, there's some light management, strategy, picking between the types and stuff, but a lot of it, it's going around and like exploring the world and kind of getting immersed in it and like forming a team and kind of connecting with some of your Pokemon, your little buds. And I think, like, I know this is not just because I'm older now. Like, I feel like the games lack that a little bit. Like, definitely, especially in Scarlet and Violet, it was very, like, barren to me. Even some of the other games between there, I've had that feeling with. But it's something I feel like they've kind of, they kind of strayed from a little bit in the last game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's definitely a design shift sensibility wherein the Game Boy is like this very like limited device. This cartridge can only fit so much data in it, and like every single thing, every single pixel has to be intentional because we need to make the best use of this space possible, and we're working within this limitation. So everything feels so perfectly put in the sense where it's like, oh, it's exploration on rails functionally. You can't do whatever you want whenever you want, but it feels like a puzzle, and it feels exciting when you have access to a new area because you've progressed to the point and solved the whatever. Like, oh, I can play the Poke Flute, and now the Snorlax will wake up, and oh, I can battle the Snorlax, and oh, I can catch the Snorlax. Oh my goodness gracious. Or the Sudowoodo in Gen 2. Things like that really enrich the world. Or having, like, unlocking Surf and being able to surf to Cinnabar Island from Pallet Town is such, like, a great design thing.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you have to go backwards with this new stuff that you've acquired and, like, have a good sense of, like, the map. Like, you have Fly now, you have Surf now. Like, this world feels like it's opening up to you at this advanced rate. And while there is something kind of like, oh, yeah, I can point at something and I can just go there in Scarlet and Violet, there is just kind of like the sense where it's like, well, then the design and intentionality is kind of gone. And now that, like, these games are bigger, you're kind of losing sight of the intentionality and the deliberate setup and the how you can explore and get that kind of dopamine hit as the world opens up to you. Like it works in games like Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, because like you're always like battling with your imagination to see how you can accomplish a task. But Pokemon isn't built like that. Pokemon doesn't give you like so many billions of tools or forces you to like come up with creative ways to come up with a solution to something that you may not have been intended to see as early as you found it.
I definitely agree that it fits better there. I'm kind of open to the idea of like doing the open world thing. Like, did you like the alright? Like,
yeah, I think I liked it more in Legends Arceus, and
those were like kind of their own sections.
Yeah, they like separated off, so they do have more of like a sense of progression. Scarlet and Violet is weird because there is like a clear, this gym leader has this level Pokemon and this gym leader has higher level, so you can't really just go to any area and any gym leader and expect to accomplish the same things.
Yeah, you do lose. Like I like what you were saying, Keifer, about like unlike finding these shortcuts back. You know, you get cut and you can kind of take that one path, or you loop back around to your town. That does have its own like Zelda like feel, where you're like kind of relocking, or I don't want to say Metroidvania, but you know that sort of.
Yeah, I was tempted to say it, but like you know what I mean. Like, I have this resource and that opens this area up. I wonder what that's like.
I would be okay. Like, I definitely would be okay with sacrificing some of that with like if they leaned into how the world was, where like you really can't go over here, or if you do, it's going to be very difficult battle wise. Because that's for me the I think the big draw for what I like about Pokemon is actually like the leveling up guys. Like I like the battles. I don't know. Like it's like none of they're very simple, but there's something I like about getting the numbers to go up on my guys, making them stronger, evolving them, and going through an area and kind of cleaning it out. You know, doing all the battles, checking off the list. I could be okay with a game where maybe, you know, you're not getting around stuff like Breath of the Wild or even the original games, but like where you have plenty of experience to gain from your Pokemon with the battles and like the push of trying to be like strong enough to exist in an area, you know?
Well, to me, I think the platonic ideal of this might be Generation 2, where you do have like that very like sense, like you are kind of being guided along the path in the Johto region, but then in the post game, you have the entire Kanto region to explore on your, and you could just be like, I'll come back to that. I'll come back to that. You can handle the Kanto region in whatever order you want, and the game doesn't break over it because it's like Kanto's kind of your playground now. That's the post game. This is optional, buddy. We put this in the game as like this cool little bonus. You played the game. You know, obviously like developing games difficult, and like scale and scope of Pokemon has increased so much, but I do think that kind of happy medium of like you kind of get both things in this game on the Game Boy.
Oh yeah.
Shows that is kind of a possibility. You just have to have, again, I guess they just aren't supposed to be like forced by gunpoint to release a video game every 2 years.
Yeah, because that's the other part that I never feel great about going like, hey, the graphics weren't good, that's why I don't like it. But like Pokemon, the new one, it didn't look very good, and that I don't know. That's part of it for me is like just like being immersed in the world. Like instead, I felt like I am in like unfinished video game land, and it was very
Well, I think one thing about it is that there are certain parts of Scarlet and Violet that do look really good.
Yeah, that's true.
But there's like so much outside of that you're like, this is just kind of okay. And you're like, maybe they should just like make it smaller, make it more focused, give it, that extra bit of polish. Even like, Kanto feels like a kind of a big world when you're, walking around all the whole thing. And,
oh yeah,
I know, things are distinct. I know which city I'm in because it's got its own theme. It's got its music. It's got its color.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they really stand out. Yeah.
Everything in Kanto is like so like there's something to do here. I think there's only like 3 areas that aren't vessels for like gym battles, and it's like Pallet Town, Lavender Town, and the Indigo Plateau. If I remembering correctly, every other settlement you go to has a gym there. And Lavender Town has its own little arc you have to like do things with. And obviously the Indigo Plateau is the Indigo Plateau. Everything there has something to do. And like you can poke further and do things like the Burnt Tower and Cinnabar, find the Seafoam Islands to find, find the power plant to find, the legendary bird stuff is like off the beaten path. But like there's such like an actual genuine thrill of exploration and mysteries while still being like, oh man, this is like very like bare bones when you look at it, considering where Pokemon has become.
Corridors to get to the next region, but it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, no, it's the intentionality, it's the design, it's about scale and scope. And again, this game was like, oh my god, do we even have like the scope and scale to do this? Versus now where it's like we kind of have to do stuff like this because this is where games are at now, without really stopping to consider like, well, what made these previous experiences so great? Is it the fact that they keep getting bigger, or is it the fact that like the design and like the experience and what it actually feels like to explore that lends itself to the experience? I hope this isn't coming across as like complaining at all. This is like actually like in praise of the earlier games and not me trying to like dunk on modern Pokemon, which I still like. I loved Legends Arceus. Like I'm not complaining.
Well, each one of them has had something about it that like even if they weren't my favorite, like there's something that I'm like, it feels like they're trying to take steps forward. You can't just make Red and Blue over and over again or whatever that style game. And I liked Legends Arceus is a good example of like trying to change up the battle system. Like anything that is just more of like kind of immersing you in the world, I think is a good choice. And I like that, how you can run around and you're throwing out your Pokemon and stuff like that. Like that's really cool. I think I'd like to see more of that, where you actually, it does feel like you're there alongside your Pokemon.
Oh yeah,
good stuff in the new games for sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah, plenty. But I think all art is the struggle against limitation in some way. And there's like this like really strong philosophy of the handheld era of Pokemon where they're like beating their head against the wall of limitation to like come up with like the most like full game possible, and it results in a fulfilling experience. Whereas like here, like now that they've like transitioned to the console stuff with the Switch, there's just been like this like mixed reception. I really like Sword and Shield. I really like Legends Arceus, but there is definitely like the thing with like getting bigger has become so literal to them that Gigantamax was like the feature of Sword and Shield.
Yeah.
I'm not even mad at them. I'm just like sort of frustrated with them in a sense where it's like, I understand what you're trying to do. And I understand like the struggle with that, considering you're having to go from this one format to the other. I just wish again that they had more time to think about these things, because there's such like a labor of love and like thought making, like decision making, that you can see that like in an area they were used to versus like this new demand of this like current era of the industry.
And it is tough too, because like all the game, there's so many expectations that come alongside them too. So it's probably like, not that you're never satisfied, but it's like there's almost like you mentioned Gigantamaxing. It's sort of like this like, okay, we have to have something new going on here. Like, what do we do? Like Gigantamaxing, or like they kind of have to come up with this sort of new gimmicks or whatever. And sometimes it's not as, I don't know. I don't often get too invested in those, but I get the idea of like, we gotta come up with something new. We don't want to make the same thing.
Yeah, I think with yellow, red, blue, yellow, there's a lot, there's still a lot to be improved on, but they got so many things right. So many things that they continue to come back to, maybe if they're not always doing it as well. Sometimes I think they're improving on it a lot. Some of my favorite evil team stuff is from like Gen 3 and Gen 5, and that all comes back from Team Rocket, which is such a cool like extra little plot. Like you start the game, you're like, oh, we're going on an adventure to catch Pokemon and be the best trainer, but also there's just like this evil team that's you as a child have to go.
You have to bust this criminal organization.
Yeah, which is interesting. Like in more recent games, they've toned that back and kind of made evil teams as more like the misunderstood crowd.
Yeah, I kind of like that they're just straight up like criminals in the first game.
Like in the Pokemon the first movie, Giovanni's such a fucking bastard.
Yeah. Like that is kind of the simplicity of it too, is though like there's not like with a lot of stuff you don't need an elaborate backstory. Actually, you mentioned the legendaries earlier, but like with the legendaries, there isn't even like a big story with that. You just find little tidbits of like the lore, and you kind of figure out where to discover them. But like it was very mysterious when I played as a kid. Whereas now they kind of, I think it's another like kind of maybe more modern expectation of games is like to give everyone their money's worth or something, you know. And it feels like, you know, they kind of have to have I get why you do it, but like there's like a story that kind of leads you to them and things like that. And I don't know, there was something about it where it's like when you found Mewtwo or whatever, where it's like, should I even be able to do this right now? That, you know, I don't know, I don't get as hooked on the legendary storylines that they put in the newer games as much.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think what we're ultimately talking about is like, this is like an amazing foundation, this first game, and like they've gotten away from it because of like other various things where it's like this game is difficult because the programmers were still learning a lot. This is like their stomping ground to sort of figure things out and then eventually get into things like Gen 2 and Gen 3, which really refine and improve the things. And like by Gen 3, they've really got of like, you know, special attack, special defense stats that really improve things. Typing being more consistent, having a better idea of what they want to do with certain characters, having enough of a variety of Pokemon. Because like you think about, let's say, for example, Ghastly, Haunter, that evolutionary line, like they're the only ghost types in the game. But also, like, they're also weak against Psychic, which is supposed to be their advantage because they're also poison types, and poison's weak against Psychic. They really figure things out.
There, yeah.
There's no balance. It wasn't built for like a competitive scene, which makes it really. It's like one of those things like, oh, this can be this. Oh God, it can be this. Oh my God, like they are really like, it's really like guerrilla style developing, and I really admire that spirit. Where now, like, they've built the thing up so much, and this is now such an industry that there's like, again, there's so many demands on them. They're kind of giving in to like the whole, like, it's like that picture of the monkey on a keyboard where there's like stimuli and like they're basically being drip fed with those things that gerbils like drink water from.
Yeah.
Like they want you to like experience everything in the game, and like it's like so.
I think that is like a demand though. I remember like having a coworker years ago. We were talking about, I don't even remember what game we were talking about. Maybe it was like Zelda, or I think he was saying what he liked about I think maybe Skyrim over Zelda or whatever or something. And he's like, I hate playing a game where the content that I paid for is hidden from me. I was like,
buddy, no.
he basically like he thinks like a game shouldn't have the right to like keep a secret from you, you know? And so I think that might be, I don't know, maybe that's part of the modern demand is like getting people to be able to experience everything. Though I don't know, a lot of games like even Mario do a thing where like, well, I guess that does apply. They let you at least experience kind of the main story and then put extra stuff behind it, but maybe that's a different thing.
The thing about like secret content is like it can't make you mad if you don't discover it, if the core experience is so fulfilling. And like that's the thing where it's like you get so much replay value from like the post game stuff in a lot of Pokemon games. I think a lot about like you don't need to get the Reggies in Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald to enjoy the game, but it's like such like a journey, an ordeal trying to figure out like how do I even get these things, and you're just sort of aware of them only because like there's empty slots in your Pokedex, and you have to like learn Braille and also like actually like do the work to find these things. Versus, I'm not saying simplicity is inherently better than putting maximalist experiences in your game. I just like think that there's like a thoughtfulness that comes with limitation versus like the idea of like, well, it's a big game and we need to put as much content in it as possible, and that's the primary goal.
Yeah. I'm trying not to be like old man yells at cloud, you know, because I realize like I'm not the target audience maybe too for the game. So like they shouldn't listen to me because like they shouldn't be trying
There's
to
a reason
win.
we're talking about this game, and it's not because we're here to dunk on everything that's come out after it. I think that there are better Pokemon games than this fundamentally, but this is a game that like is a lesson and it is part of a legacy of a thing.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like, balance our praise. We can talk about some things we don't like about Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow.
Okay, yeah. You go first.
Some of the like typing and move stuff, it definitely doesn't get right. I think the last time I played Yellow, I went through and I was like, geez, I didn't remember like this like I got caught in like a wrap where, you know, if your opponent's Pokemon is faster than you, it's like, all right, I'm just done now, because you get caught in the wrap and it keeps going, and once that's over, it, you know, it's faster, so it gets another wrap on you, which, you know, that gets fixed after that. But they also have like the whole psychic typing thing where, you know, it only has 2 weaknesses, but one of the weaknesses doesn't even matter.
Right.
And then the other one's bug, and bug is not really a factor.
It's a really weak typing in general, yeah.
That's why we had to introduce dark type, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely starts to balance things later. I know there's just one special stat that goes for like special or, you know, attack and defense. And this is still, well, the physical versus special thing will continue for the next 2 games, but, you know, having the special be fire, water, grass, and so on, and physical be rock, ground, those types, really limits what you can do with your teams. Because if you have a water type that doesn't have a strong special, then you're just not going to do well with it. It's like, it feels much less customizable. At least with the lack of balance, I think these Gen 1 games maybe have a slightly higher difficulty element than the later games do. But in general, like, you just gotta know type effectiveness.
Yeah.
And you're fine.
There's like a brute force difficulty to this, whereas like the difficulty in the onward games is more strategic. Like you're talking about like the stuff that they introduced in the later stuff, like, you know, the special attack, special defense. Gen 4 is when they finally, and I say finally, but like it's like this thing that feels so incumbent to the series now. It's like when they finally introduce like physical attacks versus like non-physical attacks. Can't remember what those are called. And it's like, that feels so like, well, yeah, of course flamethrower would like do something differently than like fire punch. Why would that?
Right. Like, I definitely agree with that type of thing, but it's something I never really, with particularly these games where it's like, I don't know, it's like, it's usually not, the game's not too like complicated to where like maybe you got to grind a little bit or something. It definitely is not good objectively, but it's something I never noticed so much as a kid, because I was like, all right, I just got to get, you know, my guy a little bit higher. There's usually a way out of a situation, but where I can see that like really, I guess, coming into effect is like if you get really competitive with it. But I never did that either. But I definitely can see how that's true in like later games. That's one element that I usually found more satisfying, was like trying to build a team to take on a particular gym leader or something like that. I think that pretty much persists to the current games, where like I would agree that element is usually almost always better than the original games. But something I never really noticed too much, because they're relatively simple beyond that, you know. Brute force it.
I always try to take the games that we talk about as they are. Like if I'm like talking about an older game, I'm not like, oh, the graphics suck when I'm talking about like the criticism. But
yeah,
there are certain things that like become really evident going back to a game like the Gen 1 Pokemon games, that obviously the games iterate on and improve on, but then there's just like the stuff that has to be. You'd like, to your point, McKenna, about being caught in wrap or constrict or anything like that. And it's just like, well, this is just unfair now. This is just fundamentally, this just sucks. This just sucks so badly. And I can't do anything about it from a strategic thing. This is just, oh my God, we're still doing this. Okay.
That feeling is stuck in my memory, like big time, to where no matter what Pokemon game I'm playing, if someone does rap, I get very like, oh God. Like I just remember that happening.
It's panic inducing.
Like, oh no.
But it's like, oh no, it's fine. It's okay. It's okay now. They fixed it.
Stuff that could have been, I guess they could have found anything else for that they do improve later on, is like how like, oh, this is just called TM02 Got to do a lot of work to figure out what this TM does,
gotta
or like
read the-
how
no.
limited your back. Yeah.
Don't want to use it. You know.
How your backpack is like kind of like a real life purse where everything's just sort of thrown in there, and you have to like figure out what you're trying to find in your bag. And then like also like your bag is very limited in what it can hold.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I was just like, that was stuff because I've played in full the second generation before the first generation. The second generation has like a lot of that stuff, but then the third generation came out, and at the time people were like, well, how much does this really improve? And I'm like, everything.
That's
you have different categories for your bag, and you have like the HMs and TMs. You can see the names of the HM and TMs immediately, and all the Pokeballs are sorted into their own spot. And like I don't have a very limited window in what I can hold, but again, that's me talking too much about the future. I just do think that the game is still figuring out like how to do things like represent text on the screen in a way where you're not spending a long time figuring out what move I'm about to teach my Pokemon.
Yeah, that's true. That's a big limitation there for sure. I think also, isn't there a part like when you're moving the boulders and you have to use strength, don't you have to keep selecting strength from the menu?
Oh, you awakened something in me.
I'm pretty sure you have to keep going to the menu, picking your Pokemon, using strength, push the boulder. I think.
Yeah. It's like you have to go into the menu and activate it. It's not even like a prompt to be like, would you like to use strength?
Yeah.
Oh
I like a lot of those like dungeons in it that people don't like, where you're being spun around and getting dizzy on the floor tiles. Like I like a lot of those, but I do remember, like, especially because it's towards the later end of the game, like sometimes pushing the boulders, I was like, oh god, here we go.
Yeah, sometimes I get nervous about like Victory Road. I'm like, how much this is gonna be like a long trip. Like, how much boulder pushing am I gonna have to do?
Yeah. Boulder pushing. Ugh.
Yeah.
I'm totally fine being tricked. It's just having my time wasted that's different. Like if I go up to a Pokeball on the screen and it's a Voltorb attacking me, I'm like, haha, that's funny. But then when it's just like you have to go into a menu and press strength a million times, I'm like, I'm gonna kill myself right here and right now.
It would be like, one thing people complain a lot about is the having to put on the boots, iron boots in Ocarina of Time. And I get it. It's a little annoying. It doesn't bother me so much, but it would be way worse if when you went to equip the boots, if it went like, do you want to equip the boots? And you equip it and it goes, you equip the boots. And you had, like that would be horrible.
Yeah, and then like every time you go up like a little bit in the water, it like takes the boots off, and you have to go back into the menu and put them back on.
Oh yeah,
you have to
exactly.
Keep actively putting the boots on. The boots are like a size too small, and they're slipping off yet.
Brutal, yeah.
I do like a lot of the like areas that these games establish, like forest area, cave area, cycling road. Yeah, just a lot of these. It's probably less so in the newer games, but I don't know. It's fun to see each new game having a new iteration of the forest. Like I was just playing Pokemon White the other day and going through Pinwheel Forest in there.
Oh yeah, or I like the one in Sword and Shield. That's like all
that
colorful.
One is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
It's like when you it's like how like you play every game after Link to the Past, and it's like that's the new Kakariko, that's the new Lost Woods, that's the new Deku Tree. Okay, cool, love that. I think Pokemon does a really good job building on like having these distinct types of areas and like the kinds of people you encounter and the types of Pokemon you encounter and everything like that. It's really, really cool how early on they establish like these specific things can only be encountered in these specific areas, and they make those distinctions much more meaningful if you can only find Nidoran in this specific area, or Zubat in caves and Geodude in caves, and water types by surfing and using fishing rods.
It's fun too, like with the people you'll meet, like it's fun thinking about, even though it's like, okay, we need another guy, like, okay, let's throw another fisherman down there. It is fun though, like you encounter, whatever, Lass or Pokenerd or whatever, and you see what Pokemon you have, and I just like thinking about their lives and their Pokemon, and why they chose them, and a lot of times it's, because Team Rocket has poison and whatever, like there's a predetermined sort of thing, but it still is fun to think like, oh, this guy, he, especially like I think of like the random people you encounter on SSN, there's like those are the most like they're just like people with Pokemon. They got some random Pokemon.
Yeah, that's SSN is probably one of my favorite things in the game. I was always sad when it left, and I was like, I don't get to go.
Did I miss something?
But yeah, just have this ship that you just get to go on and have your own little side adventure there for a second.
Fight some people in their like bedrooms, not in there, or their cabins.
Yeah.
It's like the first time that you get to be what like the NPCs are always doing to you in the game. Because like it's like such like this is like so true to life where just a stranger will walk up to you, say some bizarre shit, and then you're just like, okay. Some kid running up to you, I like shorts, they're comfy and easy to wear, and then he tries to fight you. But when you're on the SSN, you get to just go into people's rooms and do that to them. Like, hey, buddy, you try to have some privacy? No, you're not.
It is a world where you have to take like 8-year-olds as seriously as you do like 50-year-olds or whatever. Like, anyone's going to battle at any time. And I think that spoke to me a lot as a kid, is like, they do this a lot in media. Like, oh, we got to have the kid in there to get the kids. And it's,
Yeah,
it's corny.
The kids get to have a big role, and aren't just cast aside.
It felt like a big deal to me as a kid, like that I could go out and live my own independent life and harass people on a cruise ship or whatever.
Go gambling.
Yeah.
Yeah, never get.
Yep. I'm trying to buy a Porygon. I'm hitting the slots.
Yeah.
I wish they had just been able to keep the gambling in there. I know it was like a rating thing with like the later games, with like the North American releases at least. But
Return.
That was great. Just being a 5-6-year-old kid, I could get on my Game Boy Color.
I wonder if that's a big reason for why they're not trying to port those earlier games. Now that I think about it, it's like they don't know what to do about the game corner because of like there's certain classification laws in certain countries about legalized or like things that could end up promoting gambling behavior in youth.
Yeah,
maybe they got to make it the mini game corner where you do little mini.
That would be
games
fun. I've always said that they should make more games. Should have like a little building that you can go in and play just a bunch of random games.
Yeah, it's like the Golden Saucer or whatever, Final Fantasy.
Exactly.
Yeah, they should have that.
Every RPG needs a boat section, and every RPG needs a casino.
Yes, I 100% agree. Yeah.
Look, Pokemon got it. That's how you know like they had some real like RPG heads cooking in there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no. Obviously the iconic designs of like Ken Sugimori's art really shines through in something as primitive as a monochromatic 4-bit Game Boy. Obviously a lot of them are kind of horrifying now that we have like the anime and like games since then to look at, but they're so evocative.
Yeah.
And they are so like immediately striking that it's like, yeah, of course this became iconic. This is why people are so attached to that 151. They were playing something that they couldn't imagine could render something like this in scope and scale. And suddenly they're being shown all these interesting creatures basically constantly.
The sprites are so like they have like textures and stuff on them. Like you you look at Muck and it's like he looks slimy, like there's good shading and everything that, even the horrifying ones I think look so evocative, as you said. Like I love them. Tangela, classic.
There's definitely a charm to the pixel stuff.
Yeah. Also, it makes me think there's something we've talked about with our era on the N64 where it's like it's before, like you look at Mario as an example. Like Mario takes on these different designs and appearances even on the same console, and now, there's a little bit of difference. We've got Mario Wonder. He looks a little bit different than maybe Mario Odyssey or whatever, but like you get a Mario game, you know what Mario is going to look like. And this, you think you get a Pikachu, but it's not what you think Pikachu looks like normally. And I love that kind of difference of design and like seeing the different approaches. Whereas like now it's a little bit more, some of the Pokemon games have unique styles, but you kind of know what a lot of them are going to look like.
Yeah, I think even between like Red and Blue and Yellow, so a lot of the designs are tweaked.
Yeah.
Like, I think probably a lot of current designs come more from like Yellow than Red and Blue.
Yeah, like Pikachu, I think, right? He's cuter. There's something about that weird, chunky looking Pikachu that I'll always love.
Yeah, it's a good design.
I really just love Sugimori's art so much,
Oh, yeah.
and it's so I love it and adore it. I also want to shout out the music because again, there's just 4 channels of sound, but Masuda is just able to really make these moments where it's basically just 2 still images facing each other down feel like these big epic moments, and every town feeling so distinct and atmospheric and immersive. It's truly one of the most iconic video game soundtracks, despite again it's people working against limitation. And Masuda also worked as a programmer on this game, so he's really able to like fundamentally understand like the format and the language of something, and is able to make it into like this. He's like, I know what work needs to be done to make this feel the way it does, and he also knew like the sound fonts and stuff to use it. I think he used white noise to like simulate snare drums, like stuff like that. He knew what he was doing. And God, if this isn't like one of the best the soundtracks in video games ever.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Game Boy blows my mind. Like, obviously, there's a lot of not great stuff. Maybe it's because it's like been around that long at that point, but like some of the late stage like Game Boy compositions like blow my mind. I don't know. Pokemon for sure like has that thing where it's like you hear it and it's like you can almost like feel and like imagine like the grand orchestrated version of it in the 8-bit like few channels like oh man, it's so evocative.
Yeah, I know when I listen to like the remakes and they have, you know, maybe not like a fully orchestrated thing, but they redo the soundtrack and I'm still like, oh, but I really like how it sounds, the very chippy sounds of the originals, and
they do just so really cool tricks with it and stuff.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Like they'll have some notes like do the fade in and stuff like that, and it's just like wow, like they really got all they could out of this.
No, it's crazy because you like think about like a harmony to something in like an old game, and you like think like you hear like the melody, and it's like the thing you're mainly focusing on, and in the background's like dooba dooba dooba, but like he's like basically going down like some like electronic keyboard where like it's like you hear like the melody and it's like now, and in the background it's like going
yeah, there's some
shredding. You can basically you're just imagining like a little like pixel man like actually like doing a 4-piece band like going absolutely insane.
Yeah, the pixel-based guy is like shredding right now. That's probably one of the greatest like nostalgia hits that can come from that game. Is if I hear just like those jingles or whatever, like they really grab me.
Yeah, I think like the Vermilion City theme is like one of the most nostalgic music tracks I can think of.
Oh yeah,
just immediately like, oh, I'm like seaside, you know.
It's just such a wonderful like thing how it's able to like make this like thing that would be pretty flat in itself feel so alive just through sound. It's very additive, and I think it's like it's just a testament to like, you know, being a programmer and a composer to be able to pull something off like that. It's harmonious. Wow.
I mean, even the like very simple, quiet, like more low key songs are very like elegantly composed. There's like all these great. I'm bad at talking about music, you know, but the counter melodies and stuff like that. Like even Pallet Town has like, it's like kind of a complex song, or like, you know, got a very like deep sort of sound to it. This very simple little song, very elegant.
Yeah, I think he like composed it on like an Amiga or something like that, and then like had to use like his own program to convert it to the Game Boy soundscape. So he was like trying to like actually like use like obviously like it's PCM sounds. It's not analog completely or anything like that, but he's still having to like work in a more complex space and then figure out how to convert that into a more simplistic package from within. It's like even just like it's one thing to come up with the music. It's another thing to like it's like basically writing a song twice and then also like having to develop a program to make it heard. It's wild how much work went into like such a little game, but it also feels so gigantic.
Yeah, all those like that era of Game Boy, Zelda, another one where it's just like, I don't know, like it's so impressive what they did. Like that always sticks with me. Is like, I don't know, it's similar to me. I think about sometimes with like, sorry, tangent here a little bit, but like when I watch an old movie or something and like you can tell a lot more. You can kind of see like what's going on behind the scenes of like a certain prop or stunt or like, you know what I mean? Like model they've built or something, or animation or whatever they're doing. And I think a lot of people would think like that's bad that if you can tell something's like fake or whatever. But instead, I think compared to, I don't know, seeing a more modern movie, like I often find myself more impressed because like I still watch those and I'm like, how did they do that? And I know games now are such a massive undertaking. I don't want to undersell the work that anyone's doing, but you know, it's just like after all the history or whatever, it's like it's a little bit harder to surprise and shock me with like what you can do with a game, you know. Again, not to take away from any current work, obviously, but it's just when you look at the Game Boy, you're like, wow, how did they do this?
Yeah, no, it's a struggle against limitation thing where it's like you're basically like figuring things out live, and like the things that they do to make it possible are just so impressive. And like you see, like even if you can like see like the metaphorical like strings or anything like that, you see the labor. So it doesn't like really ruin it for me. It just makes me appreciate it on a different level.
Oh yeah.
Anything else you guys want to say, positive or negative, before I ask you about the game's impact on you?
The world of the game was great because you could both kind of imagine your world around it, but then it was such a big deal because of the anime and everything too, where then retroactively you could come back in, especially with Pokemon Yellow, and now feel like you're living out the show that you watch and enjoy. So like, that's one thing that really had me with just this one game, not even getting into Gen 2 for many years, was that first when I played it, I'd seen some of the cartoon, but it was more of real life. And then, I don't know, it kind of flip-flopped. And I probably replayed the game like a couple times when I was a kid. So yeah, it had a hold on me.
Oh, I was just thinking about like Lavender Town and the Pokemon Tower and how that was, you know, I'm just this kid going into this area about people who have lost their Pokemon, and then there's this whole story about, you know, Marowak and Cubone, and that's the ghost you're encountering, and it's like a little side story that's, you know, kind of part of the Team Rocket stuff, but it's just like such a touching little part of the game.
Yeah,
I don't know if there's like something that really it's like that does in any of the other Pokemon games in the same way. I think they have some other ones where they're talking maybe Gen 2 a little bit, but that part of the game stands out.
Yeah,
I think
that also makes me think of Link's Awakening, and just like that idea of the limitation of like both those games kind of they can hit on like these little personal, you know, emotional beats, while not really actually like there's not much in terms of like story or dialogue or anything there. It's more of like just like hitting upon these feelings, and like I feel like they're able to do so much with just a little Game Boy game, you know, like Link's Awakening, and those still like stick with me emotionally. Maybe it's because I was young and impressionable too, you know.
It's a combination of like it's able to cultivate such a creepy atmosphere, but also like it's not tonally consistent with the rest of the game, but in like a good way. Like I think the horror moments in video games that stick out the most to us is when a game is otherwise not horror. Like I think about the Beneath the Well segment of Ocarina of Time, and then you're like, Jesus Christ, what the hell is that? And then it's just like
Right.
Those moments like resonate with us. Again, also like the graphical limitations of it, where we're sort of able to sort of map additional horrors onto it, or like its uncanniness is inherently part
big time.
of its scariness. This is the first time you're reckoning with mortality in this otherwise pretty chill video game. And it's just like this, like, oh, bummer, man. And then, oh, it's a mom that died, and the kid wears the skull of its dead mom, and I had to help the mom pass on peacefully. And it's like, oh no, oh no, I'm five, man, come on.
I'm not ready for this. I was playing this sort of and then shortly after, like, Majora's Mask also had a lot of that sort of thing, and it just I don't know, it was cool to like it helped me a little bit, like, emotionally deal with these like heavy topics in kind of a relatively like light setting, Nintendo game.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, just everything in Icana Canyon and Majora's Mask being like the most bleak thing I could have observed at such an impressionable age.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right. One more complaint about the game. Don't want to end this conversation, but like I hate how in the early Pokemon games when you use fly, it's just like the most janky thing. Like, no, bird, go to this. No, not that one. This one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I remember that. Yeah.
Because it's like A Link to the Past when you're trying to like choose the number you want to fly to. Sometimes you're like, oh well, at least that one's numbered, so but I don't know. Yeah, that is a little janky for sure.
Yeah, but it's a great game.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great game. It's hard to recommend as like the first game you should play unless you really want to see a series evolve. But it is something that I think is a really valuable experience, and it's so understandable how this thing became what it is now, and I love it for that. Beyond like, this was an enjoyable game we all played as children during a formative period of our lives, what impact did you say playing this game made on you?
Probably made a big impact on you, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, it's really what got me into video games and kept me into video games for most of my life. I'd say it's not as big a part of my life now as it was then, but it was definitely like a consistent thing through a lot of my life, and it was one of the games that a lot of my friends played too. Sometimes I was playing stuff more single player stuff that we weren't necessarily sharing, but we'd be outside playing on our Game Boy SP or bus for a field trip, playing on our DSs, doing a battle or something. Now probably less of a social element now, but sometimes maybe you and I'll trade, or I'll trade some Pokemon with our roommate to complete the Pokedex. My experience now with Pokemon is, I'm still playing the games, but I feel like I enjoy watching other people play them as well. There's a Nuzlocke that I watch that, he does all these really cool themed ones, and he really gets into like telling a story around them. Pokemon isn't like a super story strong game, but I think even with like the simple ones back to Red, Blue, Yellow, I still felt it throughout the game, and it's like one of the things I remember more about the game. So I just connect with that more now. I think the exploration thing as well has really influenced the way I approach games. That's something one of the first things I look for in a lot of the games that I play.
I feel like too, like a lot of games you get into have certain elements that aren't really in Pokemon. Like a lot of the indie games you play maybe have like crafting or things like that. But I think at some point there's some crossover they share of just like there's a good part of those games where you're just like hanging out in a world.
Yeah, just like vibing in the world. Yeah, just like, all right, I am in this video game world now. I'm not just like completing objectives or whatever. I'm in this world. I'm living in this world, experiencing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it's like, for the impact, it's hard. I don't want to say not much. Zelda, I would say Zelda, for example, is like your old friend, or like your partner, your soulmate. You're going to be with them. You've been with them so long, you're going to be with them forever type thing. And Pokemon is more like your old friend from school that maybe you don't talk to, but occasionally you reconnect with them, see how it's going. You know, okay, you're doing good, that's good, and it makes you feel good. For me, that's how Pokemon is, and I think it's impacted me in that I'm not gonna, jump on every new Pokemon thing that comes out, but like there are things that there was so much of it that hit me that I'm always gonna be kind of like curious about it, like I do love the old movie. Actually, I have a podcast, Virtual Theater, where we talk about video game movies, and we've covered a handful of those movies and some of the show stuff, and I'm always happy to revisit. Even now, we've gone beyond and watched some from eras that I'm not nostalgic for, and it's always nice to kind of just like see like what was Pokemon all about. So I don't know, I guess that's the impact it's had on me.
Very well said, both of you. It's one of those things where it's kind of like the impact is apparent because like we're kind of hard in the paint for video games, but for me, this is kind of a seamless thing, but it sort of occurred to me in my mind when I was talking about the limitation of everything, but it made me realize that as a kid, I never really had this like line of delineation between console game experiences and handheld game experiences, because the handheld game experiences had Pokemon, and a lot of the console games, there were certainly Pokemon games on these consoles, but not in the same way that I had Pokemon in my handheld. So to me, these handhelds were a very valuable thing to have because they were able to create these experiences I wasn't able to get anywhere else. And yeah, they may have been graphically limited. I may not have been able to play the most graphically demanding 3D experiences, but some of the games I've connected with the most have been games that were released for the Game Boy Advance and the Nintendo DS, and originally stuff that started on the Game Boy. And like if I connect with like this bleepy bloopy monochromatic game, that is a testament to like how valuable it is to have all sorts of styles and forms of a game. So that was certainly an impact that was like very invisible. It wasn't like I had like the vocabulary to express like, oh, just because something is limited doesn't mean it's bad or anything like that. But it inspired imagination in its limitation too, because I was thinking about Pokemon all the time, but not just in like the sense where it's like, I like Charizard, I like Gengar or anything like that. But just in like the, oh, wow, like the opportunity that this thing has and the implication of like these little Pokedex entries and like the things that you could explore in greater details. I'm not frustrated or annoyed at Game Freak because they aren't able to make every kind of Pokemon game in every kind of style. But it is that kind of thing where it's like, oh my God, this franchise could do so much with everything. And it could work in virtually any kind of style of game because there's this richness to this world. And I think the potential of something is obviously more interesting when it's not executed on. We think about like how many things try and like the Rings of Power problem. Oh, you're trying to talk about the weird esoteric parts of Lord of the Rings versus like having that left to your imagination a little bit when it's not expressed literally. So maybe it's for the best that you don't have like every single bit of lore in Pokemon picked apart and explored to its like logical conclusion. But I love how this thing just like provokes the mind and like makes a child just think about so many cool things and what they could do within a world that does have some pretty clearly defined rules and relationships with Pokemon and humans.
Yeah, and I think kind of to connect what I was thinking earlier, but I feel like it can get you to think about just like the real world more.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's an impact it had on me, is that it did fuel like my imagination a lot as a kid. Like I would like start to see kind of more mundane parts of even the small town I grew up in. Like I would sort of imagine it as Pallet Town and stuff like that. Like I think it just fueled my imagination, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a game designed to make you appreciate the real world more because there's that inherent social component built into it where you have to interact with other people who have this game if you want to have the full, complete experience of it. And there's the showmanship, the competition part with battles, but also like we need each other because I need a Gengar or I need to just like complete my Pokedex because you have Arcanine in your game and I have Ponyta on mine. You have Sandshrew, I have Ekans. Come on, let's make a deal here. Let's make a deal.
And there's just something too like very inspiring about it. They and it's whimsical. They're like the wonderful world of Pokemon, and we're like bonded with our Pokemon, and like they've allowed us to enrich our world and our lives so much. And I love that, thinking about like Like, we see these birds that menace us as we walk around our neighborhood we're under threat of, but I'm like,
they gotta make a Pokemon based on that.
yeah, I'm glad they're there, you know what I mean? I appreciate those birds that squawk and chase us around.
I admire the series for trying to change the world as often as it tries to. And there's it is a game that's trying to inspire you to like connect with people in your community and outside of it and outside of your comfort zone for the sake of itself. Obviously, it's like commercial and capitalistic, and it's like, I mean, like you could just buy 2 versions of the game and then use it over any other, but like it's trying in its intention to get you to communicate with others, and that was the purpose of Pokemon Go. Is like everybody was like this communal experience that we were all sharing together. And there's again negative versions of it too, like when Logan Paul started to do like was one of those Pauls was like, I'm doing Pokemon cards, and oh no, now everybody wants to do Pokemon cards. Oh no, the value, this aftermarket value, and yeah, all that stuff. The good and the bad. Pokemon's Pokemon, but I do really try and hold on to the positive experiences it tries to cultivate, the friendships that you can make without even having to trade. Just like you're a kid on the playground. It's like, you like Pokemon? I like Pokemon. Let's talk about Pokemon. What are your favorites? You like Scyther? You like Scyther? Scyther's my guy.
Yeah.
You teach me and I teach you. Pokemon.
Pokemon. I think that's Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow. What would you recommend to listeners based off of their enjoyment of Pokemon? I know, McKenna, you've talked about a lot of like indie and cozy games that you like. Are there any other video games cut from the same cloth as Pokemon you'd recommend? You don't have to limit yourself to games in this discussion. You can talk about like whatever, TV, movies, etc.
I guess there's a few that I've heard of that are pretty popular that I've played a couple of demos. I know there's Coromon and Cassette Beasts, which I've played the demos of, which they're both monster tamers that are, kind of trying to do their own thing. One that I have played more recently that's kind of monster tamer, but also got life sim or life farming sim elements, which is a genre that I enjoy and play a lot of, is Moonstone Island. It's basically like a creature collector. You'll get like cards to use in battle. It's also kind of a deck builder. But yeah, you'll collect all these creatures and you have your own little farm and you can feed them some of the stuff you grow. And you like fly around to different islands to get more creatures and explore more. And that's one I've really been enjoying.
For me, it's like the game. Like I never was big into RPGs, even though I enjoy them every time I play them. I just haven't experienced them a lot, and I've been trying to remedy that over the years. But I feel like Pokemon is kind of like it's a good introductory kind of RPG because it's got those elements, but it's simple. It's made for all ages or whatever. But I feel
like a starter, you might say.
It's your Squirtle of games in a way. But I think one that's also like it's got sort of like a grounded but more sci-fi vibe, but it's like an RPG that I feel like anybody might be able to get into is Earthbound. Like that's a game that was on my like, why haven't I played this list? And a couple years ago I checked it off and I was like, I don't know, I really like that game. And I think that it's also kind of meant to be set in a more realistic, it's like you're set in like towns and you're a little boy, it almost has that same sort of thing, but instead of collecting monsters, you're out adventuring with a bunch of little kids. I think a lot of people already know that's a great game, but I think that's a good next sort of step people could go in.
I guess I'll actually mention the Nuzlocke I was talking about.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Flygon HG. He does hardcore Nuzlocke, so he has like more specific rule sets, and then he'll do unique themes like monotype, like grass type only, or some other. Around Valentine's Day, he did only pink Pokemon.
That's fine. That's cool.
He's really good at Nuzlocking. He's funny. He's really good at crafting his videos, stories. Even if you're not into Nuzlocking, I think his videos are fun to watch.
Yeah, there's a really strong narrative component to like every Nuzlocke story. I had like a Nuzlocke I did for Pokemon Emerald way back in the forum days, and I just really loved recounting my stories because it is like such a story of like perseverance in like a familiar format that's really attractive to you. I mean, if you even read the original Nuzlocke comic that like inspired the rules of everything, there's like a narrative to it that is just like, this is interesting and I like reading this. So yeah, great recommendations.
Yeah. Oh, we watched just yesterday and today the Pokemon Origins. It's like a 4-episode, like 20-minute episodes. That's kind of a retelling of Red and Blue. It's kind of they kind of like have to yada yada through a lot of it, but it's cool. It kind of evokes the vibe of it, and I think it was mainly I think a commercial for Pokemon X and Y when they made it, but to kind of like just get you nostalgic and stuff like that. It's kind of cool. It goes through the story of the game, and just like the Pokemon movies, I'd recommend.
Yeah.
Oh, Pokemon Concierge.
I was about to say I would recommend Pokemon Concierge building off of that because that is such a cute little thing. Very easy to watch. You can knock it out in about an hour, and the stop motion animation is wonderful.
Beautiful.
It's cute. Don't go into it expecting like, oh, it's this complex. No, it's just cute Pokemon stories on the beach, and that's really all it needs to be.
I want more of it, honestly. I would watch like 100 episodes of them doing like solving Pokemon's problems every episode, you know?
I'm very pro stop motion. Anything that's like, how did they do that is just insane to me. And I would love more of it. Another recommendation I would have, going back to our conversation earlier about spin-off games, I'd highly recommend that people check out the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games, specifically Explorers of Sky, Darkness / Time, one of those games. I really like those stories. There's a structure and routine to the core experience that I really, again, my ADHD brain goes berserk for. Certainly as a kid, I was like, there's nothing wrong with my brain. What are you talking about? But if you have never played a Mystery Dungeon style game before, super check this one out. It's a great starter entry into that kind of genre. These procedurally generated levels that you climb while trying to accomplish a specific task.
I feel like I would
but
love
it's all
those.
Yeah, no, they are, and like they're Pokemon. So you do a little personality test at the beginning. It determines what kind of Pokemon you are based off of that personality test, and boom, it's an isekai where you are whisked into the world of Pokemon, and you have a job and you help people and you cultivate friendships and you become really connected to your community. And it is everything I love about like, whimsical stories in a Pokemon package. So definitely, if you are going to play one of these games, do the Explorers of Sky. I would recommend into that. Oh, the music's just immaculate too in those games. And if you are looking for another way that people can like have this like harmonious friendship with Pokemon, check out the Pokemon Ranger games on the DS. However you can, or I don't know.
Who knows? Who's to say?
Where your relationship with your Pokemon aren't that you are capturing them, but you are like taming them for a moment to accomplish a task that you need to proceed. And it's just you like, I don't believe in catching Pokemon. I just want to live harmoniously with them. And there's this Pokemon here that can help me accomplish this task. So I borrow them for a second and then let them go. Just a really strong gimmick. And it's just a very interesting take on that world. And it's one of those things that makes me think about the potential of like other things people can do in the Pokemon world. So those are my recommendations. And y'all have anything else before I move on here?
Yeah, no, I think we pretty much hit it all. Watch the first movie. I don't want to get into it, but I do want to say we on Virtual Theater we've done some commentaries over movies, and we wanted to do a commentary over the first movie. We had covered it already, and I accidentally got it had the English dub, but the Japanese release of the movie, which I didn't know had this whole extra storyline in it that is I don't want to spoil it, but it's great. So if you haven't seen the Japanese theatrical version of Pokemon, the first movie, Mewtwo's whatever,
Mewtwo Strikes Back.
Mewtwo Strikes Back. Watch it. I think it's very cool. Honestly, it's great.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. If you've never watched or engaged with any Pokemon media before, it is inscrutable. Which is probably why it has like such dog shit reviews if you look at any like film critic website. But like if you have any connection with Pokemon whatsoever, you're going to get something out of it.
It'll be spiritual, actually.
But yeah, thank you so much for being on this episode with me. This is very fun to have two guests on to talk about video games. Thank you guys so much for your time. Before I let you go, please promote the hell out of yourselves.
What should we? Well, we got Flashback 64. That's our main thing collectively.
Yeah, we got the pod. We stream on Twitch now at Flashback 64 Pod.
Yes. We're on a lot of things as Flashback 64, Twitch Flashback 64 Pod. This will be coming out right around while the Zelda Dungeon marathon's happening. So go to twitch.tv/Zelda Dungeon and you'll probably catch us playing some N60. I'm playing Ocarina of Time. We're playing some other games, but we're raising money for a charity called No Kid Hungry, which we've done a couple of years now. This is I think actually our second year with them.
Yeah.
But they're cool. Just listen to Flashback 64. We got a Patreon as well. We've got a couple different tiers, but one we have that has like bonus shows where we already go kind of outside of the box of N64 on our show, but the Patreon is where we've now been doing even further, where it's just like we're just talking about, we do a lot of things together as we are engaged. So on our Patreon, we talk about, like, we just had an episode come out where we talked about Kong x Godzilla. We have one coming out of like the Planet of the Apes movies. We're just talking about whatever. So that's patreon.com/flashback64, I believe. So check that out as well.
And we
awesome.
We both have our own YouTube channels.
Yeah, McKenna does.
I'm at Harvest Gamer Miklas. I do mostly like gameplay videos of cozy indie games. I currently have a playthrough of Pokemon White going.
So more Pokemon content.
Yeah.
You've got that Pokemon Pink that everyone loves.
Yeah, which I haven't played in ages, but yeah, people love that.
And then I'm Gooey Fame, and I've got Zelda videos. So if you want more, talk about Zelda too much. So sorry.
You're playing to the right crowd, though. The Zelda episodes do really well over here.
Oh, hell yeah.
Thank you both for your time. It was really wonderful to talk to you both. And thank you so much for listening to this episode of Select and Start. Once again, I am your host, editor, and promoter, Keifer. If you enjoyed this episode, please give the show a positive review wherever you're listening to this. Engagement helps the show, and your feedback will improve it. If you want to get more engaged, give the show a follow on Twitter at SelectPodStart. If you have thoughts about Pokemon Red and Blue or any other games that we've discussed, send a DM or leave a comment and I will gladly read it on the show. You can also support me on Patreon. If you pledge at least $1 a month, you'll get early access to new episodes as well as extended episodes with exclusive content. That's on patreon.com/Keifer's Corner. You can find a link to that and the rest of my projects in the description of this episode. Select and Start is on the Moonshot Network, which is supported by its own Patreon. Find out more on moonshotpods.com. The art for the show is made by my best friend, Avery Ott. You can follow him on social media with the handle at Avery Robin Ott. That's AVRY Robin OTT. The show's theme song was composed by Mike Petrie. You can check out the links in the description for their work, as well as Flashback 64, once again, in the description of this episode. All right, I think that's it. I like podcasts. They're comfy and easy to listen to. $5.